The only thing I could suss out was that this path in the woods was, in fact, a road. I crouched down and examined the leaves. There were faint marks of muddy tire tracks on some parts of them, and the path was wide enough for a car to drive down. Maybe if I followed the road away from the beach, I would come across a main road, or even better yet, a house. Then I could call my uncle and get picked up. But who was I kidding? Why didn't I just call my uncle right now? Excited, I carefully placed the lamp back on the dead tree's limb and fished out my phone. I could call him to explain what happened and where I thought I was, and everything would be fine. Then there was Dex. I should probably wait around and see if I could find him. Better yet, I could call him, too. I dialed Dex's cell number and put the phone to my ear. It rang twice, then a click. Who is this? My blood ran cold. The voice belonged to a woman. She sounded like an old Ingrid Bergman. Hello? Is Dex, Declan Foray there? I asked, heart in my throat. No, he's not, the woman answered slowly. I'm sorry, I must have gotten the wrong number. I looked around me and pulled my coat in closer against the darkness. It's not the wrong number, dear. He can't talk right now, she drawled on, her voice sounding rather wicked. Ridiculous, I told myself. You dial the wrong number because it's dark out and you're in the middle of a storm in the woods, and you get some old woman on the line who just wants to talk. You're right. I do want to talk, the woman continued. That's why I called. Had I just said that all out loud? I put my hand to my forehead. It was clammy with cold sweat. I called you, I said barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, I was calling for my friend Dex and I got the wrong number. I quickly hung up and stared at the phone for a few seconds. It was my familiar iPhone, filled with music and useless applications, but it felt alien to me. I was about to press the home button to dial my uncle when my sight began to dim. I looked at the lamp. The flame was going out. No! I yelled and plucked it off the tree. I frantically turned the knob, hoping it would release more gas or wax or whatever was inside. If it didn't, in a few seconds I would be alone in the dark again. My actions did nothing. But just as the flame was almost extinguished, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I looked to my left. There was another lamp further down the road. It flickered just as the one I was holding went out for good. I didn't know how it happened to be a light like that. I didn't know if there was someone down there who turned it on. Perhaps that person had been hiding in the trees the whole time, watching me. Maybe it was the old woman on the phone. I shuddered at my morbid thoughts. I could either stand in the dark thinking about it, or I could move towards the light. At least in the light I could see what was trying to kill me. I know there was no indication that someone was trying to kill me, but whatever was going on was not normal, to say the very least, and my imagination and adrenaline were on maximum overdrive. I could almost feel a hand reaching out of the dark behind me and grasping my... I didn't finish that thought. I ran toward the next lamp until I was plucking it off the tree. It was the same as the other lamp. The tree was the same as the previous tree. Had I run around in a circle? No, that was impossible. Thinking about it made my head spin. Lack of thought would serve me well and preserve my sanity. With the lamp dangling from one hand, I decided to follow the road while I could and get the fuck out of there. I plowed forward through the heavy woods of wet fir and dying oak trees, musty smells rising up with each step I took. The path ahead shook with the sway of the lamp. The way curved, and I was soon able to make out the depression that could have only been created by tires. My internal navigation system was placing me as heading northeast, which was the direction of Uncle Al's and exactly where I wanted to go. I didn't even care if I left X alone on the beach. For all I knew, he could be back at the house, waiting for me, or not waiting for me and playing video games, or back at his motel room, talking to his hot girlfriend on the phone. That last thought made me angry. I was happy about it. It was better to stew like a jilted teenager over Dex than it was to fully grasp the terrifying situation I was in. I ran for what seemed like a couple of minutes, the road steadily curving into the dimness. Then, like before, the flames started to go out again. "Oh, for fuck's sake!" I screamed, the strength in my voice surprising me. It was embarrassing in a way, yet I still hoped that someone was nearby to hear it. I shook the lamp back and forth, screaming, "Fuck! Fuck you, lamp!" Terror and temper at an all-time high, I took the lamp and threw it as hard as I could against a tree. The glass smashed everywhere, and flickers of flame splayed out onto the leaves and roots. For a minute there, it looked like the whole tree would go up in flames. Something that wouldn't be all that bad. A forest fire would at least attract attention. But in the end, the leaves were just too wet, and all light faded. Tears formed at the back of my eyes. I wanted to crawl up into a ball and cry my eyes out. My heart was stressed, my limbs felt numb, and I wasn't sure how much more horror I could take. I was lost in the woods, in the dark, with nowhere to turn. The blackness was disorienting as well. Dizzy, I put my hand out for a tree to support me. But my hand hit something that was more soft than solid. Soft and warm. Like wool. Like a sweater. Like someone wearing a sweater. My hand was on someone's chest. I screamed, retracted my hand, and started booking it down the path as fast as I could. I was running blind. The ground was undulating, and I could have smashed face first into a tree at any moment, but somehow my feet kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Before I knew it, I felt the wind in my face, the taste of salt in the air, and wet grass beneath me. Though it was in the opposite direction of where I was certain the road was leading, I was on the plateau again, where the lighthouse should be. I kept running until my feet started to slip. I instinctively knew I was near the edge. I stopped, not a moment too soon, and put my weight back on my heels. If the wind wasn't there, whipping off the waves and pushing me back, I probably would have gone over. I could see the gleam on the crests of the waves below and grasped the height of the cliff as it dropped beneath me. I took the deepest breath I could and said a silent prayer, willing myself not to think about what had just happened. Now that I was out of the woods, so to speak, and had found the coast, all I had to do was follow it with the ocean to the left of me, and there was no doubt I would come across my uncle's house. I exhaled and turned north, ready to jog back. A light came on beside me. It slowly flickered to life in the empty dark. I cautiously turned my head to my right and saw the lamp, that same oil lamp I had just smashed to ground moments earlier, floating beside me in midair. But I knew better. The lamp lowered, and a face came into my view, lit up by the flickering glow. It was the face of a forgotten man, dead and bloated. Skin was peeling off and oozing chunks. Tiny lice crawled out of its ears and nose. I had seen that face before in my darkest nightmares, and now it was right in front of me. "You dropped this," it said, a low growl from its lipless mouth. Whatever strength I had left at that moment, I used all of it to turn and run. I made it several feet before the ground abruptly gave way, and I found myself airborne. I landed hard on the slope and tumbled down in dizzying circles, churning, rolling, and falling forever, until something broke my fall. Someone. They screamed. I screamed. I had crashed into them at full speed and was launched again, finally coming to a painful rest on top of a dune. My hip bone bore the brunt of my weight, and I let out a yelp at the pain. "Perry!" a voice yelled. It was also low and deep. I remembered why I was running in the first place. The face of that skinless, pussing man was everywhere inside my head. I opened my eyes and tried to get to my feet as quickly as I could when a pair of arms came out from the night and grabbed me. "Perry!" It sounded like Dex. Oh, God, I prayed it was Dex. "Jesus, Perry, are you okay?" It was Dex. He was on his knees, leaning over me. "It's me," I managed to say meekly. I could barely speak. I felt him shuffle closer and put his hand on my face, feeling my cheekbones. Oh, shit. I didn't know where you went. 1 second you were beside me, and the next I saw the slide, so I went over to investigate it, and you were gone. I swear I only took 2 steps away from you, and then I lost you. I didn't know it would be so dark. I used my flashlight, but I couldn't see shit." He was talking fast, his voice brimming with fear. "And I heard someone scream, and I knew it must have been you. I'm so sorry. Are you hurt?" He moved his hand up to my forehead and brushed my hair off of my face. It was at that moment that I noticed the wind wasn't as intense anymore. The storm seemed to be passing. I could even make out the outline of Dex's face, which was a major relief, since I was still afraid of something else. Just my hip and my sanity. He breathed out slowly. I saw his shoulders fall. He took his hand away from my face and gingerly placed it on my shoulder. My skin felt cold without his hand there. "What happened?" he asked, his voice so low it was barely audible. "Can we go home?" I couldn't function like a rational human being out here. I felt like the wires in my brain had short-circuited and fried themselves. "Of course." He got to his knees and gently helped me up to mine. "Can you walk? Do you want me to carry you?" I laughed, despite myself. He wouldn't make it more than 5 feet without dropping me. "I'm fine." He hoisted his camera onto his shoulder. I suppose I may have damaged it when I ran into him, but I honestly didn't give a shit, and grabbed the crook of my arm with his other hand. We walked quickly, raggedly, back toward the house. For the second time in a week, I felt like Uncle Al's place was the most wonderful sight on earth. Chapter 10. The house was empty when we came back in. It was only 10 p.m. at this point, but it looked like the boys had gone out somewhere. It was Saturday night, after all. Even Uncle Al was presumed missing until I found a note he left on the kitchen table. Gone to play poker at a friend's house. I was absolutely exhausted. Saturday night or not, and all I could think about was going to bed and sleeping for the next couple of days. Only there were a few things we had to deal with first. Dex and I stood in the dim kitchen looking at each other. It was kind of awkward. Neither of us knew what to do or what to say. I felt like if I tried, I would break down in tears. I was bordered with crazy town. Dex sighed. "Well, I guess I should be going." "What? You can't go?" I couldn't help but cry out. He glanced at the clock on the wall. "It's 10. I've still got to check into the motel." He couldn't just leave me alone in this house after everything that happened. I felt the floodgates opening. I turned around and faced the fridge, trying not to blink and trying to control my breath. Dex was the last person I wanted to break down in front of. I wished I had a safety pin in my pocket so I could distract myself with a touch of pain. "Hey," I heard him whisper and come closer. I waited for him to put his hand on my shoulder, but he didn't. He just stood behind me, probably unsure of what to do, which was every man's response whenever a girl was crying. But I wasn't crying. I was desperately trying to not let that happen. I sucked in my breath through pursed lips and regained control of my teasing tears. I was a tough cookie. I just had to suck it up. I turned around and looked at him. I smiled what must have been a very brave but very fake smile. I knew my eyes were moist and fearful, not matching up with my grin at all. He was staring at me, not looking as confused as I thought he might be, but curious. "Okay," I said. "You go check in. We'll meet in the morning and head back to Portland." He took another step closer, those relentless eyes searching mine for something, anything that would satisfy him. "Is that what you want?" he asked. No, it wasn't. "I'm sorry I ruined your show, Dex," I said meekly. He stared at the ground for a second and shook his head. "You shouldn't apologize. It's not very becoming of you." He looked up. "Besides, it's not my show, it's our show. Everything isn't lost yet, kiddo." Everything isn't lost yet. Where had I heard that before? Say that again? What? Nothing. I could see that he didn't believe it was nothing, but he let it slide. He looked around. "Do you want me to stay here tonight?" he asked. There was no hesitation in his voice. Of course I wanted him to stay. I would have asked anyone to stay. "This will sound stupid," I began, "but do you mind staying until Uncle Al or the twins get home? You can just hang out here, watch whatever you like, play video games. I'll go to sleep in the other room. I just don't want to be alone right now." He nodded. "Sure." I felt bad for asking, and for preventing him from checking in. "I'm sorry, it's just... I can't even begin to explain what I saw out there. He took a step towards me, shaking his head. Don't explain. I want to hear it, but we can discuss it in the morning. And please don't apologize, either. That's a weakness, not a strength. I don't need your apology. In fact, none of this would have happened if I hadn't left your side, so I'm the one who is sorry." Dex, it was dark, and so anyway, you can see why I don't mind having to stay here for a few hours. Okay. I smiled. The relief that was pouring through my body was amazing. Thank you, I said, starting toward the spare room. And good night. I'll be here if you need anything, he called after me. I paused at the door to the room before closing it behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know that he was still there. The next morning finally arrived after waves of dreamless sleep. I say dreamless because I didn't remember anything appearing in my dreams, but that didn't mean my mind wasn't running in a half-delirious, half-sleep state the entire night. Despite being so tired that my body literally could not move an inch once I lay down on the bed, my mind still raced on in a horrific rampage. Flashes of the night, the lamps, the face, the trees, the sweater, the woman on the phone. It all kept swirling through my brain. I had so many questions. Nothing made any sense, which is probably why my brain was still trying to process it at 3 a.m., even when I wasn't consciously giving it an ounce of thought. Needless to say, I did not feel rested at all the next morning, especially when I woke up to the sound of rain on the roof and a heavy chill in the air. I wished getting out of bed wasn't an option. But I had places to go, home, to be precise. Though every time I thought about stepping into the warmth and security of my house and seeing my family's faces, I also had the accompanying feeling of guilt. Ah, yes, me and my guilt. I felt horribly guilty for packing up and leaving this place without accomplishing a single thing. True, I managed to scare the shit out of myself, but that would have only been something if I had my camera with me. We would be heading back to Portland, knowing the entire weekend was a waste. Worse yet, I felt like it made me look bad, and it made my sister's blog look bad. Who would believe me now that I wasn't even able to go into the lighthouse again? I had told the world what we were doing, and now there was absolutely nothing to show for it. I was going to look like the biggest fool on earth, not only me, but Dex, too. After I washed up and put on the barest traces of makeup, I stepped into my only other pair of clothes, which happened to be my comfiest. Big socks, tapered black yoga pants, a thick red long-sleeve tunic, and a wide studded belt. I knew I looked like I was going to a rock concert in the middle of winter, but I didn't care. I just hoped my docs were dry enough to wear after they had been so waterlogged. It was nice to care about normal things. I patted my way into the kitchen to see Uncle Al eating cereal at the table. He looked up and smiled. "Morning. Want some breakfast?" I shook my head and sat down. "You look tired. Did you not sleep well?" He sounded concerned. "I thought I did, but probably not," I said, then eyed the coffee pot in the corner. Al followed my eye and got up. "Stay there. I'll get this in you stat. You are just as bad as me when it comes to coffee, Perry." I smiled gratefully. "Was Dex still here when you came in last night?" "Yes," he said while pouring me a cup of that gorgeous dark liquid. "He was sitting here and writing in some notebook. He said he didn't want to leave you with no one else at home." He raised his eyebrow over that last sentence. "I suppose that was quite gentlemanly of him. Still think there is something strange about that fellow." "No stranger than me." I shrugged and sipped back my drink. I immediately felt more awake, which of course was bogus since coffee takes about 20 minutes to kick in. Oh, the power of our minds. Something I should keep in mind considering. "Did you end up getting it all done?" I couldn't help but sigh. "No, we ended up separated. I don't know where I was. A service road of some sort? In a forest?" Al shrugged. I continued. "Anyway, by the time I found Dex again, we decided to call it quits." "No ghosts?" I hesitated. "Well, I don't know. I would like to think my mind was playing tricks on me." "You know that lighthouse has a very strange history, Perry. There is a reason I keep it boarded up." Intrigued, I examined Al's face. His sagging eyes were soft but serious. "Go on," I encouraged. He leaned back in his chair. "First of all, I must state for the record that I do not believe in ghosts, but I do believe in evil, and I believe evil lives in that lighthouse." Uncle Al's eyes turned the shade of coal. My blood did as well. Evil, in my books, was 1,000,000 times worse than ghosts. "You think it is evil and you let me go in there?" I exclaimed. "What happened to protecting your favorite niece?" He shrugged again. I can't tell you what you can and can't do. To you, the idea that it is evil might be as ridiculous as the idea that it is haunted to me. I don't even know if it is haunted. That's why we plan to go back. Whether it is or isn't to you doesn't matter. It is evil, to me. You see, the lighthouse was cursed from the beginning. It took forever to build, and a few workers died in freak accidents. And once it was finally ready for operation, the light started malfunctioning. They kept trying, but it seemed at least once a week, whatever bulb they put in, it would fail to work after dark. I nodded slowly, just as I had said. I must have read that somewhere. No way is my imagination that good. They planned to build a new lighthouse instead, one that was offshore. Not only would the new lighthouse hopefully work better, but it wouldn't get swamped by the fog as often. So the Tillamook lighthouse, just off the beach there, was opened. You know of the shipwreck that happened there? I think so. The night before the lighthouse was to be lit for the first time, our lighthouse here failed for the last time. A ship from Malaysia that was heading up to the Columbia River had crashed into the rocks beneath terrible Tilly out there. Everybody was thought to have drowned in the wreck, but that wasn't the case. No? I asked. Well, that officially was the story, but it didn't explain why the partially burned body of an ethnic woman was found tied to the lightkeeper's bed with strands of kelp. I shivered violently, thinking of the charcoal tinges on the bed I saw in the lighthouse. Al stopped and gave me a surprised look. I waved it away in a motion for him to continue. The lighthouse keeper at the time was nowhere to be found. It hadn't really surprised anyone, though. There had been rumors flying around that he had gone crazy here with the isolation. And back then, there wasn't anything around except for fog and trees, or maybe he'd been tormented by the ghosts of the people who died building it. Some people started wondering about the supposed curse on the lighthouse. Maybe it had never been cursed to begin with. Maybe he was tampering with the bulbs all along. Sure, but why? Al took a languid sip of his coffee. Many reasons: attention, boredom, and maybe he just wanted to see a couple of ships crash and burn. I guess he got his wish. Yes, he did. There had been numerous shipwrecks just off the coast here, but it took a long time for them to stop. They still continued even, with terrible Tilly lit up. Well, if they found a body in the lighthouse, how did they know it came from the ship? I mean, was it even normal to have women on those ships? She was probably a local or something, caught in some creepy kelp sex game. Al looked disgusted at the mention of a kelp sex game. It wasn't normal to have women on those ships, but people would be snuck aboard all the time. America, the brave new world, the better life. The body that they found was dressed in foreign clothing and was of Asian descent. So, rumor has it that she must have swam or floated to shore to this lighthouse and tried to find help there. I took it all in as much as I could. Things were starting to make sense in the weirdest way possible. Part of me thanked my lucky stars that nothing horrible had happened to me when I was in the lighthouse with Dex. Part of me was more curious than ever to go back and start exploring it all over again. I believe this was a battle between the rational part of my brain and the crazy part of my brain. I hoped my rational part would win. So, she comes across Lighthouse Man. Old Roddy, he interjected. Right, I said slowly. She comes crawling ashore and runs into old Roddy, who turns her into a sex slave before tying her up and attempting to burn her alive. How do we know she didn't wash up dead and then he had his way with her? Again, we both grimaced at my suggestions. You have a terrible imagination, Perry, Al chided. Well, that's humanity for you. We are a terrible species. Some of us are terrible. Some of us are good. What went on in that lighthouse must have been the height of all that plagues us. Like I said, I don't think it's haunted, but I think there's been some sort of curse, some evil on that place all along. It's just waiting for another person to take in. He looked at me sternly, perhaps with a bit of fear in his eyes. I understood what he was saying. I felt what he was saying. Haunted by old Roddy or cursed by some demon, I knew there was something in that place that so desperately wanted me. And the most disturbing thing of all was that I kind of wanted it, too. And so what happened after? I asked. I needed to ignore my feelings. I mean, did you board it all up? Was it open when you first moved here? I didn't know what we were buying when we first moved here. I hadn't heard any of the tales, and neither had Paulette, his ex. But I knew deep, deep down, there was something terrible about that place. I only stepped foot in it once, and that was the first time we all went to explore it. I think Matthew found a part of a jawbone from some sort of animal in one of the rooms. The place just felt too unsettled and dangerous, not to mention how weak the structures felt on the second floor. And really, what was the point of having your own defunct lighthouse? It made no sense to me, so we had it boarded up and pretty much forgot about it. Until last week. My lip wiggled sheepishly. Yeah, sorry about that. Don't worry, Perry. I'm just glad nothing happened to you. He watched me intently as if he was trying to suss out whether something had happened to me or not. No, I said slowly. I guess nothing really did happen to me, but since you think the lighthouse is evil, a lot of the feelings I had about the place would back that up. He patted my hand. And I'm glad you're not going back in there. I smiled at him. I felt happy for getting to know my uncle better. Maybe this weekend wasn't such a waste after all. Though, I must say, he started. I thought last night Before he could finish that thought, there was a loud knock at the door. I jumped in my seat, the coffee finally giving my heart a boost. Al got up and opened the front door. Good morning, sir. I've come for the lady. Dex was at the door, feigning importance. He had a cap on his head and tipped it jauntily. Come in, Dex. Al ushered him inside and closed the door. Dex walked over to me with a smile on his face. It also gave my heart a jolt. Good morning. Care for some breakfast before we go? He asked. Sure. I eyed the clock on the wall. Sorry for just dropping by. He looked at both of us. I tried calling your cell a few times, and I texted you, but there was either no answer, or I kept getting the wrong number. His voice lowered over that last part. I studied his face. His grin faltered slightly. Was he lying? No one had called or texted me at all that morning. I got out my iPhone just in case and looked it over. Nope, nothing. Anyway, Dex continued, looking at Al. I'm afraid I've got to steal away your niece now. I've still got to make it up to Seattle for tonight. Be my guest. I'm sorry you guys are walking away empty-handed, but I suppose these things always happen for a reason. I believe that very much, Uncle Al, Dex said. He looked at me. Will it take you long to pack? I slammed the last bit of coffee down. I hated having to rush. I got up and picked up my bag. All ready to go. He gave me the thumbs-up sign, then promptly turned on his heel and walked out of the house. I looked at Al and rolled my eyes by way of explaining his actions, which I couldn't, so I hugged him goodbye and thanked him for everything, then scuttled outside after Dex. The SUV was running in the driveway. The steam rising up from its tailpipe gave it a warm, welcome look in the morning downpour. Though it was only a few yards, I was fairly soaked when I swung the door open and jumped inside. Dex put his hand on the gear shift and gave me the once-over. Were you even alive in the 90s? Because it looks like that decade chewed you up and spit you out again, he said mockingly. He put the car in reverse and sped the car out of the driveway. I was born in 1988, for your information. Can't you count? I spat back at him. I was not in the mood for teasing of any sort. He turned to me with an excited leer. I could tell he was in the mood for teasing. You're only a child of the 90s if you had your teenage years during that decade. I mean, look at you, all Doc Martens and Converse and leggings. You're the one with the eyebrow ring, I shot back. I think it's better to emulate a time period you haven't properly lived through. Otherwise, you're just holding on to the past. He laughed. I have no past to hold on to. He flipped his MP3 player on. To my surprise, Billy Joel came on. Scenes from an Italian restaurant, to be precise. Dex began to sing along. Here was the infamous voice of Declan Foray. It was smoother, deeper, and more powerful than Joel's. It seemed to float over the words, vibrating with rich tones. It was gorgeous, hypnotic, and so out of place. He continued to sing until he noticed me staring at him. I must have looked very confused. Dex turned down the volume. I do this in the mornings. So, where did you want to eat? I saw this great stereotypical diner in town that must serve the blackest coffee this side of the divide. Sure, sounds good, I said as he went straight back into song, snapping his fingers and wiggling in his seat. He did this every morning? I looked at the clock. It was 8:30 a.m. Where on earth did he get the energy to put on a musical at this hour? I wasn't complaining, though. It was fascinating to listen to and to watch once I got past the weirdness of the spontaneous and strange direction. I didn't think it was possible to outshine Billy Joel, but Dex was doing so as he was speeding down the coastal highway toward Tillamook. He smiled and sang to me, it seemed. My heart skipped a beat again. Did he know the quickest way to charm the pants off me was to sing to me? I didn't know you could sing, I lied. No, he eyed me suspiciously. I suppose there are a lot of things you don't know about me, kiddo. But you will, in due time. Right, I thought sarcastically. I knew that after this weekend, there wasn't going to be any more time for us. A short while later, and after a couple more Billy Joel songs, which Dex unfortunately did not sing his way through, we pulled up next to the diner in Tillamook. Dex was right about it looking stereotypical. It had a 70s orange awning with god-awful faded font on top, Tilly's Diner. Painted on the dark tinted windows were images of coffee cups, bacon, and eggs done up in that pebbly glass paint peeling at the corners. I couldn't tell from the outside if it was even open. Looking down the foggy, rain-logged street, I couldn't imagine anyone actually being alive in this town, let alone having breakfast. As we entered the diner, the smell of fat and griddled meat hit my nostrils. The door chimed loudly and echoed across the restaurant. There were a few patrons, surprisingly, but not surprisingly, they were ragged-looking seniors. We made our way to a table in the corner, which was covered by a green plastic tablecloth. The light was dim and terribly unflattering. "This is charming," I said, sliding in the padded booth across from Dex. "It is, isn't it?" he said, without a trace of sarcasm. A rotund waitress came by. She had thick glasses, a bulbous red nose, and seemed to lack a chin. I couldn't look at her face too long without feeling nauseous, so I looked at her name tag. Nancy. Nancy tossed 2 laminated menus across the table at us with a hint of contempt. I smiled uneasily at her, and she did not return the sentiment. She turned her attention to Dex. He flashed her his sly Joker smile. "Good morning, Nancy. How are you on this gorgeous day?" Once again, it was spoken with utmost sincerity. Nancy looked at him suspiciously. "Tilly's big plate breakfast is on special today. Want coffee?" "We both do, yes, please," Dex said, not even bothering to see if I agreed. I guess he knew that much about me so far. I knew he could sing. He knew I liked coffee. We were like old pals. Nancy left without acknowledging the order. Dex looked down at the menu and wiggled his brows. "I think she likes me." "You would think that," I said somewhat viciously. I couldn't help myself. Dex put the menu down and looked up at me with a strange look in his eyes. "Are you okay?" He made me uncomfortable. I regretted saying anything and fidgeted in my seat. I turned my attention to the menu. "I'm fine." "Don't shit a bullshitter," he said angrily. Now it was my time to be surprised. His eyes looked almost venomous. I was even more uncomfortable now. Thankfully, Nancy chose that moment to come by and slam 2 cups of coffee on the table, the dark drops spilling over the edges. "Well?" She looked at us, cocking her brow. "We'll both have this special," Dex said, without taking his contemptuous eyes off of my face. I looked up at Nancy and gave her an apologetic look, but she took no notice, merely sighed and snatched the menus up off the table. I didn't even want the big plate special or whatever it was, but something told me it wasn't a good time to bring that up. I sucked on my lower lip and gradually brought my eyes to meet his again. "Remember when you told me I should let you know when you're creeping me out?" I reminded him. "This is one of those times." He held my gaze for a few seconds more before leaning back in the booth and running his hand through his hair. "This is also the time you tell me what happened to you last night." Ah, a light went on in my head. Now I knew one thing that made Dex tick. When he didn't know something. No wonder he was so intent on trying to read my thoughts. If he didn't know everything that was going on, it drove him nuts. He must be one of those boyfriends who constantly asks you what you're thinking. It probably drove his girlfriend up the wall. "Okay, then. I'll tell you from start to finish. Just keep an open mind, refrain from thinking I am crazy or delusional, though I may very well be, and don't say anything until I'm done." His dark eyes lighted up a smidge. "I promise." I sighed, took a long gulp of the terrible black coffee for strength, and told Dex everything, starting with my dreams, what I made up on the beach, about what Uncle Al told me. and what I saw last night. When I was done, the platters arrived on our table, and I was suddenly ravenous from talking excitedly for so long. I shoved a greasy slice of Canadian bacon into my mouth and said, "And now you know everything I know, which is nothing. Happy?" Dex had stayed true to his word and remained quiet and attentive during the whole spiel. Even now, he wasn't saying anything. He just pursed his lips until he resembled a sexy duck before digging into his breakfast. I tried not to watch him eat, even though I could see from the furrow between his brows that he was deep in thought, trying to make sense of what I told him. We ate in silence. The longer he went without saying anything, the more torn up I felt inside. Did he believe me? Did he think I was mental? Because if there was anyone at this table who was mental, I knew it wasn't me. That said, I did have a dead man trying to hand me an oil lamp last night. "You actually believe all that?" he said. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "Of course, it happened. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's what happened." I looked at him closer. My mouth dropped a little bit. Was he doubting this whole thing? "You think I'm making all of this up? This was your idea." He laughed. "Come on, Perry. We didn't really find anything the first time we were out here. I wouldn't blame you for trying to make a mountain out of a molehill." I could barely form thoughts, let alone speak at his assumptions. "You think I'm faking it?" "I think you see what you want to see," he said, and shoveled an entire pancake into his mouth. I was too livid to even consider how gross that was. I couldn't help but reach across the table and grab his forearm. I squeezed it, hard. He looked up at me, pancake frozen inside his wide yap. "Dex," I said with as much intensity and seriousness as I could muster, "I'm not lying. I don't care about any of this. You found me. In the end, you found me. I'm just telling you the truth. You think that lighthouse is haunted. You're looking for all the proof, but I'm telling you now that I know it is. It is." He searched my face while slowly chewing the pancake until it was gone. I didn't know what he thought, but there was nothing more I could do at this point. "Look," I finally said, "I'll prove it. Let's go there right now. Hell, let's go tonight. We can drive back to Portland after. I need to show you. I need you to believe me." He shook his head. "No can do, kiddo. I've got to get back tonight." "Why? What do you have to do? Is your girlfriend so paranoid that she won't let you out of her sight for the weekend?" He was taken aback at that and managed to laugh. "My girlfriend? Jen doesn't give two shits if I'm there or not." That was news to me. I tried not to let that show. "No," he continued. "I'm just done with it. I don't think I should get any deeper into this whole thing. I've got enough footage, and with your permission, I could combine it with what you shot last week." "What if I say no?" I countered, arms crossed. "I'd say you're being awfully stubborn and acting like a typical young girl who isn't getting her way," he shot back. And then I'd shrug, wipe my hands clean of this whole thing, and go home. "To your girlfriend who doesn't even care if you're there or not?" He threw down his napkin. "Why do you care?" "I don't care. I just think you're chicken shit." "Excuse me?" I could tell the anger was rising behind those eyes, but I didn't care. I was past caring and beyond angry myself. "That's right," I reinforced. "I think you are chicken shit. You're happy to call this whole thing off because you're too scared to go back there because you actually think I am telling the truth. And the truth scares you." He leaned in closer across the table and this time grabbed my forearm. "You scare me, Perry," he growled and gave my arm a sharp squeeze. "You." I eyed his grip. He met my eyes and then very slowly, hesitantly, released me. "This is going to be a really awkward car ride back home, isn't it?" I asked, a trace of amusement in my voice. The whole situation was ridiculous. He sighed and leaned back, pushing his plate away from him. "I hope I'm driving you as crazy as you've been driving me," I said bluntly. He shook his head and got out of the booth. "I'm going to go pay," he muttered, despite the fact that I wasn't done eating. It didn't matter, though. I had had enough, too. Of the food, of everything. At least breakfast was free. I watched him approach the till and decided it would be a good time to get a breath of fresh air before the hellish ride back. I walked out of the diner and took in a deep breath. I closed my eyes and looked up at the sky, letting the rain fall on my face and feeling like it was washing away the dust that was accumulating inside my brain. I exhaled through my lips slowly and fully. I opened my eyes before I started to feel a bit off balance. There was a woman, an old woman, standing directly in front of me. She was grinning a bright smear of red, waxy paint. The lipstick was on her yellowing teeth. My breath caught on the way out. I had seen her before in the lobby of my office. I don't know how long we stood there staring at each other. I felt paralyzed, unable to breathe, move, or talk. She didn't move either, just kept up that demonic grin. She slowly reached over with a bony hand and placed it on my shoulder. Her hands were covered with many rusted cocktail rings. The white taffeta coat she was wearing had clownish puffballs on it. They were all different colors: bright yellow, orange, red, blue, and green. She really did look like some satanic clown's aging mother. She started to speak. Rather, her sticky red lips moved, but no sound was coming out. She spoke like this for a few seconds before she finally said, "Declan." What about him? I thought inside my head, the terror competing with curiosity. "He's got some stories to tell," she whispered, her voice low, almost metallic sounding, as if she was speaking through a phone. There was a familiar accent on certain syllables. "He'll tell you one day about what happened to him. You just need to watch him. Watch out for him closely. You're cut from the same cloth." She took her hand away, and with her eyes focused on the diner, walked straight inside as her coat ruffled behind her in the light breeze. I stood still, my breath coming back. I realized I was soaked to the bone from the rain, and maybe sweat. I didn't care. I looked around to see if anyone else had witnessed what had just happened, but there was no one on the wet gray street. I looked back at the diner and took a hesitant step toward it, wondering why she had gone in there, and if anyone else noticed how fucking freaky she was. I dipped low, trying to see inside through the dark tint and the stupid food paintings. I couldn't make out anything except a few shadows of people sitting down at their tables. I put my face at the window and cupped my hands around it, not caring if anyone inside saw me trying to be a peeping Tom. I had thought I saw some sort of commotion when the door flung open and Dex burst outside. I jumped a few inches off the ground and almost knocked my head against the glass. He looked around him, pure panic in his eyes, and then spotted me. He reached over and grabbed my arm and pulled me roughly towards him. "We've got to go. Now." We ran over to the car. My mind was racing. What was going on? Who was that lady, and why did she warn me about Dex? Watch out for him? What did that even mean? I jumped in the passenger seat and barely closed the door before Dex stomped on the gas and the SUV rocketed down the street, veering side to side on the slick roads. I decided to heed her advice. I would keep an eye on him. He looked like a man possessed. I turned my head to look back at the diner, but Dex yelped, "Don't look back there. Keep looking forward." Hard in my throat, I did what he said. "What the fuck just happened?" I squeaked out once he brought the car off the street and onto the highway. He just shook his head, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were a hard shade of white. "Dex, talk to me. Slow down," I yelled as the car went skidding around a corner, water flying everywhere, my body straining against the seatbelt. He kept his foot on the gas, speeding in deathly silence. He reached over and locked all the doors in the car. Watch Dex, indeed. I felt like he would be the last thing I would ever see. Chapter 11. We were speeding crazily around the wet corners on the 101 heading north. With the doors locked for some inexplicable reason, and Dex refusing to utter a word or even look my way, I was on the narrow verge of having a freak-out. It was obvious that Dex was having one himself, as the look of absolute fear never left his eyes. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to grab hold of the steering wheel and pull the car over myself. But as strong as I was, he was no doubt stronger, and in this weather I'd probably end up flipping the car, or worse. I wondered if screaming would help, or if pleading would help, or if crying would help. Billy Joel was still playing from the speakers, which made the situation even more absurd. And then it dawned on me. I knew what it was. I knew what Dex was afraid of. It all made sense. He saw it, her, with his own eyes. "You saw her," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "Didn't you?" Dex's hands tightened on the wheel, though his foot came off of the pedal slightly. His eyes darted towards me, and then back to the road again. I leaned in closer, careful not to invade his space. I saw her too, I confided. And I've seen her before that back in Portland. She told me things. Dex's brow furrowed. What did she say? So you did see her. He ignored me. What did she tell you? Pull over and I'll tell you. I won't talk to you while you're like this. You're going to get us both killed. Just like that, Dex stepped on the brakes and yanked the Highlander down a rural road flanked by waving chestnut trees. The car lurched to a stop, and he impatiently flipped the gear into park and flicked off the ignition. He took off his seatbelt and adjusted himself in his seat so he was facing me. The rain was falling hard on the roof. I had always found that to be one of the most soothing sounds, and this time was no different. Talk, he commanded bluntly. His eyes were non-committal. His long, wide mouth was set in a grim line. His hat had slid down a bit, adding shadows to his face. The front of his hair flopped onto his forehead. I reached over and tilted the hat's brim up off his brows and gently smoothed his hair to the sides. His forehead was hot and smooth underneath my hands, his hair slightly damp from sweat and hair product. Touching him felt strangely intimate, like I was really seeing him for the first time. I don't know why I did it. I guess some part of me instinctively wanted to soothe him. It was the first time I'd seen him look remotely vulnerable. I was only a hand's length away from his face. His eyes, though unreadable, were looking deep into mine. I could have easily sat there for a long time just staring at him, holding his gaze. If I imagined hard enough, I could almost see lightning flowing between us in an unbroken line. But the more I stared at him like that, the more I became conscious of how much of a psycho I must have looked. I took my hands off of his forehead and dropped my eyes to the seat. The bolts were broken. I noticed how heavily my heart was beating in my chest. What was it about this man that agitated not only my mind, but my heart as well? There was only one way to find out. I took a deep breath and dove in. Last week at work, I said, I was waiting for the elevator. There was no one in the lobby, or so I thought. Then I noticed this lady sitting totally motionless on the couch. She was like no one I had ever seen before, like someone out of a David Lynch film, almost. I met his eyes again. They had never left mine, like they were waiting for my gaze to return to his. I felt like he was trying to hypnotize me. I was torn between feeling self-conscious and wanting to look away, or to fall deeper into them and lose myself. Then there was that accompanying feeling of tightness in my chest. The feeling that I wasn't getting enough air, that I was drowning in this indescribable whirlpool. I couldn't take it anymore, and quickly diverted my eyes to the outside of the car. The rain and interior fog had blurred the windscreen, but I could still make out the shapes of the trees dancing in the background. I focused on their movements, all the while knowing he was still looking at me. I continued talking. She was wearing... Well, it looked like she was dressed for her prom, only she had to be about 80 or something. She had perfectly curled hair, like they did in the 40s, set with pins and everything, and a whole face full of the thickest makeup ever, like grease paint. And her lipstick, my God, I have never seen such a sloppy job. She even had it on her teeth, which was scary because this freak would not stop smiling at me, even as the elevator doors were closing. I shot a glance at Dex to make sure he was still listening, and gasped. There was a trail of blood running out of his mouth. He was biting his lower lip so hard that he was drawing blood. His eyes remained motionless and fixed on mine. I started to wonder if he was truly looking at me, or if he had gone into a trance, or was experiencing some kind of seizure. Dex, you're bleeding, I said, trying to hide the horror in my voice. With a measured movement, he languidly licked his lips and dropped my gaze. I quickly reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a tissue. He reached for it in his stupor. I pushed his hand aside and dabbed the tissue on his lips. With my other hand, I leaned on his shoulder and bent down so that my face was right in front of his. No lazy gazing this time. I needed him to see me. Are you okay? I asked politely but firmly. Seriously, answer me, Dex. Otherwise, I'm calling my uncle for help because I don't know what to do with you right now. He took the tissue from my hand, balled it up, and then tossed it in the back seat. He sucked back on his lips for a few seconds. The individual hairs in his mustache bristled. For a mere moment, I entertained the idea of sucking his lips myself. It was an inappropriate thought, above all else, and I pushed it out of my head. He released his lip. It had stopped bleeding. His eyes looked up at the ceiling, and he took in a deep breath. I felt that maybe I wasn't helping. I took my hand off of his shoulder and sat back. 2 weeks ago, he started, his voice rich like cream. I took Jennifer to Bainbridge Island. Oh, yes, Jennifer. The main reason why sucking his face would be oh so inappropriate. I sat further back still. I actually had to move there from New York at the end of high school to live with... Well, anyway, needless to say, I had never gone back there since I moved. But Jen was insisting that we at least pay the place a visit, since she had heard there were a few trendy wineries popping up here and there. It's all about the fucking trends. I nodded, eager to know more about him. He continued. Finally, I just gave up and told her we would go for a day trip. The weather was gorgeous, and it had been fucking fabulous until this last week. And yeah, there were a lot of bad memories, still locked up and lurking around different corners, but I felt like I was close to putting that part of my past all behind me and moving forward, as we all hope to do. So, Jen decides she wants to get some gelato at this busy new store, even though I know she's going to start regretting it and throwing up in the bathroom after she eats it. She's lactose intolerant and uses it as an excuse to binge and purge, an acceptable form of bulimia. I hope you don't subscribe to that bullshit. He wagged his finger at me. I shook my head adamantly. Anyway, she goes and waits in this retardedly long lineup for pansy-ass ice cream, because that's all gelato is. So I decide to occupy myself and take a wander down by the docks. If there is anything I can't stand, it's waiting for people. Keep that in mind, Perry. Yes, where was I? Oh, yeah. So I walk down to the docks. It's a gorgeous day, and people are milling about, doing their usual tourist thing. I'm watching a middle-aged couple getting ready to leave in their sweet sailboat when I see something out of the corner of my eye. Someone is sidled up next to me. Now, I love making inappropriate banter with strangers. I seriously do, but on this particular day, I don't feel like talking to anyone. So I ignore this new person who's standing beside me. I probably did this for about 3 minutes or so, long enough for the boat I was watching to motor away. Finally, I just can't take it anymore. For an instant, I think it's probably someone looking the other way. Fascinating how we always assume things revolve around us. But I was right to begin with. I see this old lady standing beside me, staring right at me. She is exactly as you have described, right down to the lipstick on her teeth. She was also wearing something highly inappropriate. So much so that later on, when I described what I saw to Jen, I was shocked that she hadn't seen her. How could she not see an old lady wearing Dame Edna makeup and a gown ripped straight off of Betty Davis's dead body? Dex's tale was creating shivers up my spine. And what happened? I asked, enthralled. I was suddenly very glad we were close to each other in this car. I was about ready to jump into his arms. He cleared his throat. Well, I don't know. We must have stood there for some time, though maybe it was just a few seconds. Her smile was so omniscient. I couldn't think of what to do or say, and the funniest thing was that she seemed oddly familiar. She said some stuff to me that, well, she seemed to know everything about me. She said... His voice trailed off, and he looked down at his hands. A lock of hair fell forward again. I waited for him to continue, not wanting to pry, since the topic seemed to be more than personal. Basically, she said that I'd find someone who could help me find what I was looking for. Someone who would help me get closure. Then she started to leave. For some reason, I just couldn't bring myself to run after her as slowly as she was moving. I could only ask her who. She told me exactly this. You will find her in the lighthouse. And then she went around the corner and was gone. You didn't go after her? He shook his head, the white of his eyes showing clearly. I couldn't. All I could think was that I had to get back to Jen. I didn't want to see that woman again. But she knew all that stuff about you that no one else would know, I cried out. I know, he said, but I didn't want to know how she knew. The lighthouse, I mused. Well, it didn't make much sense to me until later when I came across, well, you. And it still didn't make any sense, at least at the time, but he looked at me with a tinge of yearning. Maybe it was amazement? Maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see. Anyway, I knew I had to get you on board with my idea, no matter what. You told the twins that it was your boss's idea, and that you were just doing what the man says, I pointed out, still annoyed over that revelation last night. I lied, he said simply. Why? Because sometimes I lie, Perry. We all lie, even you. But not everyone is brave enough to admit it. I wasn't satisfied with that unsettling answer. I knew it would only serve to make me second-guess everything he did and said now, but I ignored it and urged him to continue. So you wanted me because I was the lighthouse lady? At first. And then it made me realize that perhaps it was a sign that I was on the right track. That this was the time to finally break away from Wine Babes and get something started on my own. Wine Babes was always Jen and Jimmy's idea. I was only brought on at a later date when the last cameraman quit. Well, I said and sat back against my seat. I wasn't sure what to make of this now. Well, he agreed. We sat in silence for a few moments. Finally, I had to ask. And then you saw her, just now in the diner. What did she say to you that made you freak out like that? His eyes flashed with fear. He fixed them on me. They held me there. I'd rather not say. Basically, he sighed and started to chew on his lip. I watched him intently to make sure he didn't draw blood again. She basically said that this was only the beginning, and that we had to finish what we started. And what do you think that means? I asked. He ignored me. Did she say anything to you? I felt that if I told him what she said, if there was some truth to it, which I believe there was, it would only put him on the spot. But unlike Dex, I couldn't lie. He would know. She said that you'd tell me what happened to you, whatever that means, and that I had to watch you. I left out the part about being cut from the same cloth. That notion was too ridiculous to even mention, and kind of insulting. Watch me? For what? He asked, almost uninterested. I don't know, she's some creepy clown lady. He managed to smile and stared at his fingernails. Yeah, she is, but she knows us. She knows both of us. She knows you, I pointed out. I only saw her once before this, and now she only talked about you. She mentioned you, too, he admitted casually. My heart flitted a beat. I felt he was about to say something damning, though I had no idea what that could be. She knew something deep, dark, and secret about Dex. What deep, dark, and secret thing could she know about me? What did she say? She said that I needed to take care of you, that you needed me, and that I had to keep an eye on you. He laughed at that last part. I think she was implying that you could be dangerous. Me? Dangerous? I gave Dex a wildly bewildered look to amplify the doubt and confusion that I was feeling. Don't look so shocked, he said calmly. I can see it. See what? I told you that you scared me, didn't I? He looked me in the eye for a second, and then looked away. Even though I had taken stunt lessons to feel powerful, to feel dangerous, what he just said chilled me to the core. I knew I could be vaguely dangerous with a hooking block, but to have this older, stronger, weirder man tell me he was scared of me? Well, that wasn't right. I wasn't like that. I'm 5'2" and as sweet as a mouse, I said defensively. He pursed his lips and raised his brow. You are short, and I know you can be sweet when you want to be, but there are different kinds of dangerous, kiddo. I'm just going to leave it at that. I had the need to vindicate myself and show him how sweet I could be, but perhaps that's what he was talking about. I suddenly found myself doubting my very nature. Hey, he said, and pressed his index finger between my brows, smoothing out the furrow that must have been there. It's okay. I'm a big boy. I'll watch out for you if you'll watch out for me. Deal? His finger felt hot against my forehead, melting into it like a knife into a warmed block of butter. Deal. I smiled shyly. He removed his finger and looked wistful. What now? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. What do you think this all means? Again, I wish I knew. But I think we are meant to find out. Meant to? Like fate? Dex didn't strike me as someone who put too much stock into fate. Maybe. Maybe not. But I think you agree that this is much bigger than the both of us. That woman, what's happening to you, these aren't just coincidences. Things are happening for a reason. Be that as it may, I still don't know what we're supposed to do about it. I think you do. You said so earlier. Did I? I exhaled loudly and watched the rain patter on the window. It was slowing down, and the sky was lighting up a shade or two. It was hard to believe it was just 10 a.m. It had only been 24 hours since Dex had picked me up from my parents, but it felt like a lifetime ago. Yes, I guess I did know what we had to do. The only thing that seemed right. Go back to the lighthouse one more time while we were still out here. Film the crap out of that thing. Get it done and get out, alive. I didn't add that last word for effect, even though I got goosebumps as I thought it. Something told me that going back this time would be a lot different, a lot bigger, a lot more terrifying. If we went back to the lighthouse, something would definitely go down. There was too much buildup, too many feelings for it not to. The woman told Dex that we weren't finished yet. Call me crazy, but I was inclined to believe her. When the woman talked to you in the diner, did anyone else notice her? I asked curiously. He thought a moment, then shook his head. I honestly didn't notice. I thought I saw the waitress give her a strange look, which would mean the lady is in fact real. You know, not a ghost, if that's what you're asking, but I can't be sure. She's either real or she's not. If she's not real, she's a ghost. She could be something we are both imagining. Is that even possible? I think we'd have to share a consciousness if it were. I'm not big on fringe science, though maybe I should start looking into it. Take a community college course on it. They have paraphysics at ITT Tech, right? His smile stretched lazily across his face. It pleased me to see the color had returned and his eyes were calmer, pliable. I felt calmer, too, just knowing that we were both in this together. So, then, I guess the only thing left to do is to go back and try again. Today, I announced, newly determined. Tonight, was his rebuttal. All logic and rational thought points to a daytime visit, I argued. You know nothing is going to happen during the day. No, I don't know that. You don't know that. Crazy crap happens all the time in the daylight. And it'll be so much easier to catch on film. Exactly, it would be easier, hence why nothing will happen during the day. Don't you ever wonder why no one has gotten flat-out photographic proof of a ghost? Because it can't be seen that way. Is that your theory? Yes, and it's a good one. Ghosts, the paranormal, weird shit, there is never solid proof because whatever we are hunting refuses to be captured. They refuse to be seen by everyone. They exist enough to lure us in and seduce us, but in the end will never give us anything solid. It's like ghost law. Didn't you see Beetlejuice? Uh-huh, I said slowly. Though an awesome film, I had no idea what he was getting at. They got in shit for letting themselves be photographed. I don't think that's too far off. Plus, I think the energies can only be picked up by certain types of people, say, people like you. And, well, it just makes for more suspenseful filmmaking. I thought you didn't believe there were ghosts. A lie, remember? Oh, right. What if we go just as it gets dark? I proposed, trying to compromise on behalf of my chicken shit nerves. Because 7 p.m. isn't as scary as 2 a.m.? Yes, exactly. He shrugged. Fine by me. Then we can head back to Portland as soon as it's over. You do have work tomorrow, don't you? I nodded. I did have work. I had that meeting and had almost forgotten about it. I didn't want to go into the meeting looking and feeling like hell, but I knew I didn't have much of a choice. That being said, of course I did have a choice. I could call the whole thing off and forget about it. Get on with my life. But I didn't want to get on with my life, not the life that I left behind in Portland. Even with the promise of a promotion in the wings, I couldn't imagine going back to the way things were. It was unnerving, horrifying at times to feel like your grasp on reality was loosening, to be dealing with things that were way beyond anything you understood about life and death. And yet it was so enthralling. Somehow, by dealing with the dead, I had never felt so alive. And having Dex at my side helped, too. In fact, I don't think I would be able to go on if it wasn't for him. Somehow, he made the dreams, the scares, the unknown, all bearable. And now, after talking to him in this cold, rain-beaten car parked on the side of the coastal highway, I felt I was one step better to understanding him. Well, one step with a million more to go. But still. He sat back in his seat properly and put on the seatbelt. He adjusted his jacket and gave me a smile that made me weak at the knees. I was glad I was sitting down. "Shall we head back to your uncle's place and plan this thing properly?" I smiled and nodded. Not so much at what he had just said, though. I nodded to myself, realizing that as I was getting to know Dex better, I needed to be on my guard. Regardless of evil curses, old Roddy, or creepy clown lady, falling for this man would be the scariest thing of all. Chapter 12. Suffice to say, Uncle Al was mighty surprised when we showed up at his door again. As much as he loved the company, I was sure he breathed a giant sigh of relief when Dex and I had left that morning. "Sorry, Uncle Al, you can't get rid of us that easily." Still, he was gracious enough to let us lounge around in his house all day. The boys were up at this point and playing video games, which suited Dex just fine. I decided to make myself useful and relinquish some of the guilt I felt by making an apple pie for the men from scratch. Yeah, I know I don't seem like the type of girl who would slave over a stove, and I'm not. My cooking skills are atrocious. But I did have my way with the oven. Besides, it was something to do in order to pass the time. I had already used the twins' internet for an hour, just answering emails from people and checking out the blog comments. Ada was back in full swing and fully immersed in proving her blog was her blog and no one else's. In fact, she had posted every day since I left. It felt like she was trying to bury my posts under heaps of fashion and frivolity. It didn't really matter, though. I knew I had a backup plan, Dex, and I was still getting inquiring emails about my adventures anyway. A local ghost hunters chapter out of Salem, go figure, Oregon, was asking if they could interview me or perhaps come see the lighthouse. I decided to let them stew on that for a while, even though the answer at this point was a flat-out no. Yet I couldn't help but bring it up with Dex as we sat down at the kitchen table, armed with pens and pads of paper, ready to plot out the course of the evening. So, a local ghost hunters club in Salem was hoping I could come aboard their team and perhaps show them around the lighthouse, I said casually. Dex stopped whatever he was writing, but didn't look up at me. He cleared his throat. "And?" "I haven't gotten back to them," I answered truthfully. He opened his mouth to say something, but then abruptly shut it. But then he opened it again. "Well, you can do whatever you want to do. You're a free agent. We haven't signed anything." He sounded nonchalant, like he sincerely didn't care what I did. It bugged me. I was kind of hoping he would get jealous, as immature and petty as that sounds. It totally backfired. As if on cue to totally hammer that point down, Dex's cell started vibrating on the table. A picture of Jennifer flashed across the screen. I know my face must have fallen and was quickly turning a vibrant shade of pink. Luckily, he was occupied. "Hey, babe," he answered. I could hear her voice muffled on the other end. She seemed to speak for quite a while. Dex briefly looked at me, and I tried to project a casual curiosity. "Yeah, that's fine. Seriously, I don't mind. Go do whatever it is you girls do. No problem. I won't be home now until morning anyway." His eyes flitted to mine, but he was looking through me again. His voice was different when he was talking to her. It was a pitch or two higher, and none of that sexy, gravelly warble. I wondered what that meant, if anything. "Yes, not yet. Okay, bye." He pressed the off button and put down his phone. "Okay, where were we?" he asked himself, picking up the pen and putting it to paper. I couldn't help but ask, "She doesn't mind you staying another night?" He shook his head. "Nope." He tapped the paper with the butt of his pen and stared out the window. "Do you have any more pie?" "Yeah, there's a slice or two that I put back in the fridge," I said uneasily. I guess he wasn't going to talk about her to me. Maybe I did ask too many questions. Maybe he just wanted pie. He folded his hands neatly in front of him and put on a very sweet smile. "Would you mind getting me a piece of pie?" He raised his brows, the wide-eyed, manic look coming into his eyes. I tried not to roll my own eyes and got up. I opened the fridge, bent over, and pulled out the pie and a bottle of milk. I waved it at him. "Want a glass of milk, too?" I asked scornfully. He was staring at my ass. At least that's what it looked like. I guess when it's the biggest thing in the room, it must be hard not to stare at it. I waited for him to look up. He eventually did and gave me a bright, innocent flash of straight teeth. I narrowed my eyes at him. "Were you staring at my ass?" "Yes," he replied without hesitation. His eyes were round and crazy, or playful if you wanted to use a polite term for crazy. I shook my head. I put the milk back in the fridge without bending over this time, got out a fork and put a pie slice in front of him. I could feel the flames creeping up my neck and onto my cheeks. He didn't seem bothered by it. "Obviously, I'll need a napkin, too," he said matter-of-factly. "Obviously," I muttered as I walked over to the drawer and tossed a napkin in front of him. I sat back down across from him and eyed him warily. He folded it neatly a few times and then put it into his shirt pocket so it stuck out like a handkerchief. Then he dug into his pie, finishing it off in a few mouthfuls. He pushed his plate away and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, apparently forgetting about his napkin. He noticed me. I guess I was staring again. He'd better get used to it, though. It was hard not to when he was acting so... Oh, God, so many adjectives to use here. "You're not having anything?" He pointed at me with the fork. "I don't like pie," I said feebly. That wasn't true, but I don't know why I lied. "You don't like pie? What kind of person doesn't like pie?" He laughed. He reached forward and actually poked me in the arm with the fork, lightly, but still. You can't be trusted. I instinctively batted the fork away from me. "You're the one with the fork." He opened up my hand and placed the fork in it. "Now you have the fork." He sat back in his chair, looked down at his writing, and thoughtfully scratched his sideburns. And just like that, it was... "I just want you to enjoy the pies in life, Perry," he shot in. "That's all." "I enjoy pies," I managed to say. I wasn't about to charm him with my wit, that's for sure. "Pies are a metaphor," he said quickly. He exhaled, then slammed his fist down on the table. The pie plate jumped. I jumped. I'm pretty sure the twins in the other room jumped. "All right, enough lollygagging," he barked. "Let's have a concrete plan of action for tonight. As much as I love to fly by the seat of my pants and shit everywhere, I don't think we can afford to do that this time. Maybe next time. Sound good?" "Oh, God, whatever," I uttered under my breath. "That's the spirit," he mused and started scribbling furiously on the paper. I soon realized he was drawing a detailed layout of the lighthouse. Now, there were 4 levels, right? I couldn't remember. "I don't know. How far did you make it before I showed up?" "Not to the top." He finished the sketch and jabbed at the tower with the pen. "We'll be going up there tonight." So much for having enough events to keep us in the safer downstairs levels. He pointed to the house part of the building. "We'll also hit up the 2nd floor here, now that we have the key. And I'd like to get you back into that bedroom again." I felt sick at that idea, remembering what Uncle Al had told me about the dead woman tied to the bed with kelp. "I'll try," I said, "but I'm not going to do anything stupid. Got that?" Dex gave me a quick smile. "Sure." It wasn't very reassuring. I wondered if that was one of his lies. We went on to discuss what equipment we would be bringing, what I should say to the camera, and where the start and finish rooms were. "Well, you should probably have a safety word, too," he said. "A safety word, like in S&M? His eyes flashed animated and bright. "The safety word is Jell-O." God help me if I ever had to say Jell-O for any reason. I gave him a wry smile, but his eyes were focused past me on the living room. I turned my head to see Matt and Tony standing there, whispering stuff into each other's ears and giving us the stare down. "Can we help you?" Dex asked. "What's up, boys?" I added in a more light-hearted tone. The twins exchanged a quick glance before Matt came forward, eyeing Dex with trepidation. We have kind of been listening to you guys, and, well, we want to help." Tony spoke up and joined his brother by his side. "Okay," I said slowly. "We live here. It's our lighthouse," Tony went on, crossing his arms defiantly. Matt rolled his eyes. "We just think we could help you. For your TV series, internet, whatever it is." "And how is that?" Dex asked in a schoolteacher voice. Another quick glance between the twins. I could tell Tony wanted to shoot his mouth off, but Matt pulled up a chair and sat down. He looked at Dex for acknowledgement, but faced me to lay it all out. Good cop, bad cop. "Perry, you know Wiz?" How could I forget? "Well," he continued, He has a small boat up by Nehalem Bay. We were gonna go up there later today anyway do stuff. So I was thinking we could take you out on the water. So you guys could get some good shots of the lighthouse from that angle. The idea of going out on a boat, especially in crappy weather, was not at all appealing, but I could see Dex was starting to give it serious thought. It's like Matt knew the magic phrase was good shots. Seemed the way to Dex's heart was anything that would help his filmmaking. That and pie. Dex looked down at the drawings and then out the window at the gray sky. I waited for him to say something. We all did. Finally, he looked back at Matt and shrugged. Sure, if you think it's a good idea. He wanted to appear nonchalant, but I could tell he was probably kicking himself inside for not suggesting it in the first place. I guess some different shots and points of view really would add some variety to the way we've been doing things, and I know the twins have been feeling a bit left out during this ordeal, which did happen to be on their property. Still, I felt uneasy about it. That was nothing new at this point. I was feeling uneasy just talking about pie. But going out on the water with Wiz at the wheel, no less, just seemed like some sort of accident waiting to happen. Matt and Tony gave each other matching grins. Tony laughed. Good thing, 'cause we already told Wiz about it. He's waiting for us at the dock. Now it was time for Dex and me to exchange an uneasy glance. Figures we'd have the wool pulled over our eyes by them. Uncle Al had stepped out for a bit, which was probably for the best. Despite having a 32-year-old, a 22-year-old, and two 19-year-olds making their own decisions, I knew he wouldn't be too happy to hear we'd be going out boating, and with the Wiz, no less. We quickly got the equipment ready, plus found a few extra plastic bags and ponchos for emergencies in case the rain started to pick up again, inevitable, and headed to the twins' truck. Dex and I got into the narrow back seat, which for some reason had a crab trap taking up half of it. I didn't know what the point of having a truck was if you weren't going to keep things in the canopy part of it, but now was not the time to question the twins on anything. Unfortunately, this meant that I had to practically sit on Dex's lap. Okay, maybe it wasn't that unfortunate. The seats themselves were damp and a bit moldy, whereas Dex's leg was firm and warm. Did I mention firm and warm? Still, I couldn't help but give him a quick, embarrassed smile for not only having the weight of one ass cheek and one thigh on top of him, but also for being so close to him. I was literally right up there in his face. Sorry, I said, my voice lowered, because my lips were only inches from his. The last thing I wanted to do was breathe my stinky breath all over him. He smirked, maybe thinking the same thing. Meanwhile, I was aware that the twins were staring at us from the front. Yeah, sorry about the crab trap there, Matt said, eyeing us in the rearview mirror. We didn't want to get it wet. No point even trying to figure that out. I just gave them a well-placed eye roll, and we were on our way. Of course, the road was a bit bumpy coming out of the driveway, and I was instantly aware again of A, how much I weighed, and B, how much my boobs jostled when they hit a pothole. I swear they almost took Dex out at one point. I had to bite my lip hard to stop myself from laughing about it, and avoided looking directly at him, as if he was a solar eclipse. After 20 minutes of being way too aware of Dex's body beneath me and his hot breath at the nape of my neck, and being subjected to non-stop Nickelback courtesy of the twins' god-awful CD player, we finally rolled into a shoddy-looking marina littered with half-abandoned fishing trawlers and stacks of rotting crates. We piled out of the truck and into the air, which was colder and wetter up here. Wiz sauntered over to us, looking every bit the punk that I remembered from a week ago. A scruffy face, fraying hoodie, and sleazy eyes. Actually, in the daylight, he looked older, too, which didn't bode well considering he made out with my 15-year-old sister. He greeted the twins like they were all from the same hood in Compton and gave Dex and me the head nod. "What's up, ghost hunters?" he said. "Ready to get fucked up?" I said, looking up at Dex. I could see Wiz was going to grate on his nerves in 2 seconds flat. "We'll get fucked up later," Max said and gestured to the boat. "How about we take the boat out first?" "Sounds sensible." Wiz laughed and took a Mickey of rum out of his front pocket. He took a swig and winked at Dex and me. "It's my right as a pirate." He walked off to the docks with the boys following close behind. I shook my head and muttered, "Can't believe you made out with my sister." Dex laughed. "That fuckwit made out with your sister? Isn't she in high school?" I sighed. "Yes, she is." He smirked at that. "I know you ladies like the bad boys and all, I chuckled, maybe too hard. I don't. He raised his brow at me, the ring catching the weak light. Good to hear, he said with a sly grin, and started after the boys. We walked down the slippery dock, past leftover fish guts, missing planks, and barnacled hulls, until we came to Wiz's boat. Surprisingly, it wasn't a shit heap like the rest of the boat seemed to be. It was just a small boat with seats and a tiny cabin at the front that had just enough room for a bed. I shuddered internally. I was glad Ada never got to see this place. We climbed in, covered ourselves and the camera with ponchos. With Wiz driving, I now knew staying dry wasn't going to be easy, and whirred out of the harbor at such a speed that some old man on the docks was waving his fist at us and yelling at us to slow down. Once we were out of the bay and into the open ocean, things got wild and fast. I was hanging onto my seat for dear life, while Dex had to repeatedly yell at Wiz to take us down a few knots. With each wave we hit, the wetter we got. If Dex's camera was going to get damaged from this, of all things, there would be hell to pay. Finally, Wiz got the hint. Or rather, Matt took over the wheel and let Wiz and Tony finish the rest of the rum. The boat slowed to a comfortable enough speed that Dex was able to start shooting the shoreline. We were quite a ways off from the lighthouse, but the pounding gray waves, bustling white surf, and stretches of pasture land and beaches were quite photogenic. And on the other side of us, off on the horizon, was the faded speck that was the Tillamook lighthouse. Terrible Tilly. I pulled the poncho tighter around me. I felt miserably damp and just a tiny bit seasick with each lurch of the boat. To turn my mind off of it, I watched Dex as he lined up the shots, adjusted his camera, and panned around us. "Are you going to need me to be in the shots?" I asked above the roar of the motor. Not that I was filming material at the moment, with my damp, matted hair and garbage bag type attire, but I could have used something to keep me from throwing up. Funny how I'd never gotten seasick before. "I think I'm good," he said, keeping his eye on the viewfinder. "These will probably just have some narration over them later." He gave me a quick, curious look. "Are you okay?" I was about to answer when Wiz decided to shove the bottle of rum underneath my nose. "This'll fix you up," he yelled, slurring already. Well, that was enough to get me to move. I got up to my feet unsteadily as the boat rocked all over the place and made my way to the back. Hey, careful," Dex said, grabbing my arm to steady me. I motioned for him to let me go. I felt uncomfortably close to vomiting. I walked to the opposite edge of the boat, where the Pacific stretched to meet the matching sky, and went down on my knees. "She's gonna hurl," Wiz yelled from the front. "Shut the fuck up," I heard Dex tell him. "You okay, Perry?" Matt asked, ignoring the two. I motioned for them to just stop talking and leave me alone, and concentrated on not losing my lunch over the side. The bottom of the boat soaked my knees, but I didn't care. I gripped the edge with my hands and put my head over until all I could see was the sloshing gray surf beneath me. The guys were all yammering on about something, but somehow my brain was cooperating with me and slowly drowning them out, like my ears had a dimmer switch. I kept my focus on the churning ocean, concentrating on the myriad of muted, cold colors and the shapes the creamy seafoam was creating with each crest and fall. The waves of nausea continued to pass through me, though. The only thing that felt worse was the uneasiness and panic that also coursed through my veins. I was fearful, and I didn't know what of. I closed my eyes and breathed in the salt air. The roar of the engine, the boys, and sound of the waves subsided until all I heard was the throbbing of my own heart in my head. "Perry." It was a female voice. I opened my eyes and looked. All I could see was the ocean. "Perry," it said again. It was eerily familiar and coming from in front of me, from the waves. "Perry, are you okay?" Could I be hearing things? I slowly turned and looked at the rest of the boat. Dex's back was to me, still filming the land and the lighthouse, which was now coming into view. Matt was focused on driving, while Wiz was yapping to him about something. Tony seemed to be paying attention to him while eyeing me in his peripheral vision. "Perry, help me," I heard the voice say again from the direction of the water. My eyes widened and heart slowed. I had no choice but to look back over the edge of the boat. In the water, it looked like something dark was moving beneath the waves. At first, it looked like a passing shadow of a crest or manipulation by a whitecap. But the more I stared, the more I could make out something. Was it an arm? It moved like one. Then fingertips. I could see a hand just below the water's surface. I tried to scream, to say anything, to move, but I couldn't. I could only watch a hand reach out of the water, turning from a watery shadow to a physical object. It was shades of green and white, but it was real, with blue veins running up the arm. And then the arm was joined by another, like a headless person was treading water. I was riveted to the spot where the head should be. I could see the swirling shadows beneath it. One of the hands started wagging a finger at me. I casually recognized the blue nail polish on its finger. I had that same shade. Still gripping the edge with my hands, I slowly got to my knees until I was standing right above and peering down at the body. The head broke through the water. It was me. I was looking at myself, floating in the water, eyeing myself down with dead, glassy eyes that streamed green fluid. "Save me, Perry," she said. My mouth dropped open. I felt like my body was going through a free fall. My mind reeled. And before I could react, she lunged out of the water and grabbed hold of my poncho with both hands. I let out a scream that shook my bones to their marrow and was pulled forward over the railing of the boat. The water rushed up to greet me, turning black before it was about to swallow me into its depths. Then I was grabbed from behind and pulled back up, just as my face could have kissed the waves. I fell backwards into the boat. Someone caught me. "Perry!" they yelled, and the boat came to a full stop, throwing me further into the person. It was Tony. He was gripping me hard from behind with both hands, while Dex had his hands on my shoulder, gently shaking me. It literally felt like forever before my eyes could actually focus on him. "Jesus," Dex swore, his eyes a mix of being worried and being pissed off. "What just happened?" I asked, my breath finally coming back into my body. I looked over at Wiz and Matt, who were watching me from the helm, looking more afraid than concerned. "I think you had another incident, Perry," Tony said quietly. Dex gave Tony a sharp look, but I ignored him. What had happened? I turned to look back at the water. The waves rushed past as they always had. There was nothing there. "You didn't see her in the water?" I asked meekly, knowing how crazy that made me sound. "See who?" Dex said. Tony let go of my arms, and Dex pulled me in a little closer to him. "Who was in the water?" I shook my head. Forget it. "Seeing things again," Matt spoke up. "Shut up, Matt," I said, though frankly it was kind of true. I thought Dex would have jumped all over what he said, but he appeared to let it slide. "We were calling for you. You were just staring over at the water. I'm guessing you didn't hear us." I nodded in agreement. I was feeling stupider by the minute. He sighed and led me over to the seats. He snapped his fingers at Matt. "I think we should head back now. Do you have a life jacket? Maybe a blanket or something?" Tony disappeared into the cabin and came out with a life jacket that Dex attempted to put on me. "For your safety," he said in all seriousness. Pfft. I tried to swat him away. I'm not a baby. Nonetheless, I was freaked out to my very being and let him put the jacket on me. Then he wrapped a smelly plaid blanket over me, and the boat was heading back to shore. "Guess you should have had some rum after all," Wiz joked. It didn't sound like such a bad idea anymore. My mind was having trouble processing the events that anything to just shut it all down would be welcome. We rode back in silence for most of the trip until Tony tapped me on the shoulder. "Hey, do you still see that shrink?" he asked. It was a dicey question, but his voice sounded innocent, like he was just curious. It didn't mean I wanted to talk about my meetings with Dr. Friedman, our family psychologist. "He wasn't my shrink. He was the whole family shrink," I said calmly, as if it wasn't a big deal. "He was only there because of you," Tony pointed out. "Hey, bro," Matt warned from the wheel. "Not the time or place to talk about it." Tony shrugged. "Sorry, it's just if you are seeing things again, maybe you should give him a call." "Seeing things again," I repeated rather viciously. I had no clue what he was talking about. I looked over at Dex and rolled my eyes to indicate it was all bullshit. Dex didn't look too convinced. You've seen things before? What kinds of things? Dex asked. I sighed. I wasn't. I looked at the twins. I don't know what you're talking about, Tony. Dad said you were sick, like crazy, and that your parents were freaking out, like almost going to commit you, or drugs. Tony, it was just drugs. I spat at him defensively. Drugs? Dex and Wiz said in unison. Oh, like anyone on this boat is one to talk, I said. So I did some drugs in high school. Everyone does. Not everyone goes to a shrink because of them, Matt countered. I did, Wiz said, the first valuable thing he'd said so far. See? I said. Parents freak out. I was a big pain in the butt. I was an idiot. What can I say? But that's in the past. It's all fine now. I'm fine. No one looked convinced except Wiz, who went back to not caring. Dex looked the least convinced of all. He kept staring at me, trying to figure me out, trying to read my thoughts. I leaned back in my seat and rolled my head towards him. Look, I'm tired, and sometimes you see things when you're tired. You should know that by now. After all, it was only that morning that we were both faced with the impossibility that is creepy clown lady. What was the difference? And what if I wasn't seeing things? What if I really had seen someone in the water? A ghost of myself? Was that even possible? Dex chewed on his lip for a few counts, holding my eye contact, before saying, Are you sure you can handle this? What the fuck? I swore. I surprised myself and everyone else on the boat. Even Dex was taken aback. Of course I can handle this. What was the point about talking about all that stuff this morning? We decided that this is what we're gonna do, so this is what we're gonna do. Just because I saw something in the water doesn't mean I'm not stable enough to keep going. We had a deal. All right, it's okay. Calm down, he said, reaching over for my shoulder. I inched it out of the way. The nerve of him telling me to calm down. It's just that you almost fell into the ocean, and your cousins here are talking about how you used to go to a shrink. I know, it was the drugs, or whatever unfortunate thing you were into as a teenager, but, you know, some knowledge about this would have been nice before we started. I let out a sarcastic guffaw. Oh, so now the fact that we don't know each other that well is becoming a problem. I see. He knew I was right. I had been trying to get nothing but information out of him this whole weekend, and now that the tables were turned, it was a problem for him. Okay, kiddo. Just checking, he said, and started reviewing the footage he had shot, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 13. It was getting darker by the minute when we returned to the marina and headed back to Al's. He wasn't all too happy we'd left, and turned an angry shade of purple when the twins told him about going on Wiz's boat. Thankfully, the beef he had was just with the twins. He left Dex and me alone to do our own thing, though I could sense Uncle Al knew something was up with me. Obviously, I was more on edge than ever before. I tried to push the incident on the boat out of my mind, but every so often the image of myself in the water, reaching for me, jolted into my brainwaves like a subliminal message. For better or worse, I really didn't have the luxury of dwelling on it. We had a job to do, and as afraid as I was far too stubborn to back down, especially now. We had a show to shoot, and it wasn't going to film itself. By the time the sky turned a resolute shade of charcoal, Dex and I were ready to go. It had grown dizzyingly wild outside in the last hour, with the wind coming from all directions, but it was nowhere near as chaotic as last night. We wanted to be as prepared as possible this time, so I wore Dex's black cargo jacket on top of the rest of my clothes. It wasn't camera-friendly like he had hoped, but he also didn't want me to get pneumonia. I didn't mind. I figured all black would possibly hide me from all the ghosts. Plus, it smelled like him. Really nice. We stood outside the back door, side by side, watching the distant waves catch the yellow light projected from the house. Dex seemed to be deep in thought, with his camera hoisted up on his shoulder. I didn't want to think about what we were about to do until I absolutely had to. Finally, he turned to me, his face shadowed by the light and glistening from the light rain. Are you ready for this? He asked gravely. As ready as I'm going to ever be, I answered. He reached over, picked up my hand with his, and held it in front of us. I'm not letting go of you this time. His voice was gruff. I knew he meant it. I nodded. He squeezed my hand. It felt warm and strong. I squeezed back, hoping I never had to let go. I wanted him to put his arms around me and make everything okay. Instead, he nodded. Let's go shoot some ghosts. He walked off, pulling me along by the hand, and soon we were on the beach heading south with determined strides. I felt like we were heading into battle. I could almost hear dramatic World War II music in my head. That and the theme song from The Matrix. We made it through the dunes and up the embankment without much fuss, aside from me slipping at a point or two. Dex held on to me every time. In fact, his grip tightened after each near miss so that by the time we actually found ourselves in front of the lighthouse, my hand was numb. I didn't know if the third time would be a charm or not. I didn't see any crazy lamps in the forest, no bloated dead guys on my trail, and Dex was in my sight and within my grasp the entire time. But that didn't stop the sight of the Darkhouse from taking my breath away. It felt like the fear was bringing tears to my eyes. Dex looked up at it, taking it all in. He slowly let go of my hand, which responded with pins and needles, and took his camera off his shoulder. He began to adjust it and shot me a sympathetic smile. I'm not leaving your side. Jello, remember? I smiled bravely for him, appreciating how normal he could be when he wanted. He brought the key out of his pocket and got it ready in one hand. With the other, he flicked on the camera light. I winced at the brightness and shielded my face with my hand. Sorry, he said. You'll have to get used to it. Ready to roll? Not at all, but I nodded just the same. I almost felt like I had stage fright on top of everything, but realized I should embrace it with open arms. It was a lot easier to deal with than death fright, for lack of a better phrase. Dex hit the record button and gave me the countdown with his fingers. Go. We are standing in front of the Rocky Point Lighthouse, I said loudly, about to make the first journey inside with a professional camera crew, hoping to capture on film any traces of old Roddy or any other terrifying spirits who may inhabit these ocean-battered walls. We decided to have very little narration on film and fill in all the historical facts with voiceovers afterward. Dex just wanted me to explore naturally and react to what we saw. I immediately knew I was going to look like the biggest chicken shit. I felt hypocritical for calling Dex one earlier. He passed me the key and took the camera behind me. The key was cold, long, and slimy in my hand. It felt unnaturally heavy. I slowly walked to the door and inserted the key into the lock. It clicked. The sound was powerful, even in the howling wind. I put it in my pocket, turned the rusty handle, and pushed the door open. It opened halfway as the groan and creak of the hinges echoed across the dense room. Dex's light shone forward, illuminating the dust particles in a greenish haze and casting the blackest shadows to either side of me. I know Dex wanted me to walk into the room, but I couldn't. I still had time to run away. I didn't have to go back inside this place, which had become larger than legend in my life, a place that held everything I ever feared and didn't know I feared yet. I'd experienced a lot this last week. It felt like it was more than I had ever been through in my entire young life. But at this moment, standing at the threshold of a dead, evil place, it felt like I was at the gates of hell. Hell with an ocean view. Dex cleared his throat behind me. It grounded me somewhat. He said he wouldn't leave me. I had to bet my life that he wasn't lying. I stepped into the room and opened the door the rest of the way. My boots thudded against the wood floor with each step. I stared at my feet. It was interesting that even though we had been in the room the day before, our footprints were already gone, covered up by a thick layer of dust like we had imagined the whole thing. I looked at the camera. So much dust. Is that normal? Because of the light, I couldn't see Dex's expression, so I knew this would be the start of me asking the camera lots of stupid unanswered questions. I walked into the middle of the room by the large solid table and looked around, breathing into the sleeve of the code and trying to avoid the musty air. Slam! The door, suddenly agile, swung shut. The event almost ruptured my anxious heart as the impact rattled the paintings on the wall. There was a metallic clatter, and I spun to see 2 pots and pans falling off of the stove and onto the floor. The noise was deafening. I looked at Dex by way of the camera so he could see how frightened I was. I didn't like how I couldn't see his face, but there wasn't much I could do about that. The dust around the pans began to settle. I had a strange urge to put them away neatly, but the idea was absurd. Might as well start vacuuming, too. Our plan had been to walk around the room and explore it for any cold spots or weird objects. After that, we would go into the hallway, ascend the stairs to the second floor, and poke around the unexplored room above us. Then we'd move to the dreaded bedroom I was locked in last week, and finally all the way up the winding staircase to the tower top that used to hold the cursed light, the soul of this very station. I kept all of this in mind, using it as a sort of script to follow, which made me focus more on the technical task at hand instead of the potential pants-shitting scenario. Speaking of the task at hand, I had been staring motionless at the fallen pots and pans long enough, totally ignoring the fact that the camera was rolling. Dex was probably going to have to edit the shit out of the footage when we finished. I inhaled low and slow through my nose and walked over to the darkness on my left. Dex followed me with the camera, lighting my way until I reached the armoire that I had seen yesterday. It was tall and made of solid wood that matched the table. I opened the doors and hoped the dead body wouldn't fall out. All I saw inside were a pair of rubber boots and a hooded jacket, the type a fisherman might wear. But even though the jacket looked old and the threads were coming loose in several places, it was free of dust, as were the boots. I didn't know if it was worth mentioning or not. "Looks like they've been used recently," Dex said, his voice echoing rough and emotionless in the room. Guess it was worth mentioning. I nodded. Yeah, no dust. It was weird, but I wasn't about to start thinking that they actually had been used recently. I know Dex said that for dramatic effect. I hoped it was for dramatic effect. "Can you light up the rest of the room?" I asked, pointing into the void. Dex aimed the camera and light at the walls and ceiling. Everything looked menacing in the grainy beam. Even the chair stacked up in the corner resembled a horrific scarecrow to my impressionable eyes. I didn't find anything else too interesting in this room. It remained dead and quiet. The light came back to my face and then moved slowly over to the door, which led into the hallway. I went over and opened it, slowly, for effect. It was just as I remembered. The room across from us, where I busted in the window, was closed, but I knew it wasn't worth the look. Dex stepped into the hallway beside me and lowered the camera. It felt nice to feel his body against my shoulder. I felt so disconnected when he was in filmmaker mode. "You're doing good," he whispered. "Thanks," I said, looking at him even though I couldn't see anything with the light pointing in the other direction. "Let's go upstairs. Go slowly, though. With the light coming from behind you, you probably won't be able to see where your feet are stepping." I turned to the staircase as he put the camera back on his shoulder and shone it my way. "Okay, just promise you'll stay right behind me. I don't want to repeat of last week," I pleaded. "No?" he asked, sounding surprised. I looked behind at him, the light blinding me. "Are you serious? Of course no." The beam moved with the shrug of his shoulders. "It would be more entertaining." "This isn't supposed to be entertaining," I said. Dex was silent for a moment. "Then what is it?" Standing at the foot of the staircase was not the place to have this conversation. I couldn't believe he was concerned with making this entertaining. "It's scary," I admitted. "It's supposed to be scary. That's why we are here, for the show, remember?" "Yeah, but you said we were meant to come here." "Yes, to film the show. Get out of that little head of yours and think about the big picture here." I glared at him in the dark. "Well, I'm scared, okay?" "So what? We need you to be scared." "So what? What did he mean, so what?" I gave him the stink eye, and with as much bitterness as I could muster, said, "Why do I have to be? How come you aren't afraid?" "Because I find life to be scarier than death," he replied matter-of-factly. And with that, I heard the sound of a door creaking open from the second floor. I froze and listened harder, heart pounding in my chest. Dex remained still, too, his breath sucked in. The sound continued a lot longer than seemed possible, like the door was revolving around on its hinges with no door frame. My eyes rolled around, searching the staircase blindly. The creaking sound eventually came to a stop. I looked at Dex, wanting more than ever to see if he held any fear in his eyes, but as usual, I only saw his light. I bit my lip. I knew he would want me to go upstairs as planned, but I don't know if I could, especially now. I stood staunchly, my face firm, and refused to move. Dex reached out and pushed me lightly, so my foot had to land on the first step to stabilize myself. I shook my head violently in protest and braced myself as he nudged me again, harder. I had no choice but to go to the second step. Again, the movie Vertigo flashed through my head. I was Kim Novak, refusing to go up the bell tower while an obsessed Jimmy Stewart forced my every step. What would Dex do when we were at the top? Would I fall out the window to my death? I was suddenly afraid. I was suddenly afraid of Dex. Earlier, he seemed to be on my side, but now he was practically forcing me to go up the staircase to the source of a sound that was obviously caused by someone or something that was inside the building with us. Something evil. Every bone in my body told me to get the hell out of there. But if I wanted to run, would he let me? Maybe his handsome face and obscure charm were blinding me. It hit me again with more urgency this time that I didn't know Dex at all. Beneath those deep eyes and high cheekbones, he could be a complete psychopath. Actually, I was sure he was at least a partial psychopath, and an admitted liar to boot. Would he stop me if I tried to get out of here? I thought madly. I had no doubt he would at least try. I cursed myself for being so immature, for thinking this man really cared about me, some young, chunky girl he had just met. I had always seen the uncertainty stretched beneath his hooded lids. I had chosen to ignore this. I guess while thinking this, I was staring at him in absolute horror because the light came off of my scrunched face, and Dex reached out to put his hand on my shoulder. I recoiled slightly from his touch. I couldn't help it. Now there were two things to be scared of, and I knew at least one of them was able to hurt me. "Hey," he whispered. "Come with me." He squeezed past me until he was 2 steps ahead on the landing. He aimed the camera light forward with one hand and reached for my hand with the other. He squeezed it, though I felt no comfort in his grasp this time, and continued to walk up the stairs, pulling me up with him. If I let myself go limp, would he drag me to the top, step by step? I followed reluctantly, not about to start dragging my feet. The blackness and unknown nipped at my heels. I needed to feel the lack of fear that Dex seemed to have. We got to the second floor to find both doors closed. From the sound we heard and the fact that we never heard a click of closure, I expected at least one of the doors to be wide open. This was better, somehow. Perhaps what I heard earlier was all in my head. After all, Dex never acknowledged the sound to me verbally. Maybe I was slowly going crazy. I kind of preferred that idea. We stood there as the light bounced between both of the doors. I knew he was expecting me to choose a room to enter. I also knew he would make that decision in the end. He aimed the camera at the room I could not get into last week. I took the key out of my pocket and turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight and reveling in what was known and real. This simple key was of this world. What it opened may not be. Dex didn't say anything. He was waiting. I could be stubborn and refuse. From the rigidness of his stance, I knew he was preparing for that. I stepped toward the door and quickly inserted the key and turned the lock. I looked behind me at Dex, not the camera, which I could see was recording again. "Nothing will happen to you," he said, sounding certain. Famous last words. I turned the latch and pushed open the door. Dex's light shone inside, but revealed nothing except green dust particles floating in the blackness. I couldn't see any furniture or walls. I couldn't even see a ceiling. The light just penetrated blankly until it eventually faded off in the distance. The room was freezing cold, too. The air flowed toward us fast and sharp and smelled fresh like the ocean after it rains. Against all better judgment, I walked 3 steps into the room and stopped. I had stepped onto something soft and slippery. I peered down at my feet, but the light didn't extend that far. I looked behind me at Dex. For a second, I thought my eyes had adjusted to the dark because I could kind of make out his silhouette as he remained in the doorway. Then I noticed the light on his camera slowly fading. The red recording light now flashed blue and yellow. "What's going on?" I yelled. He turned the camera around and looked at it, the blue and yellow lights flashing on his face. I could see he was confused, if not scared like I was. "I have no idea," he said. He tapped the side of his camera, the noise sounding dull. Unlike the rest of the building, there was a distinct lack of echo in this room. Suddenly, the hallway lit up with that brilliant white light. Dex shielded his eyes with his arms and stepped out into the hall, looking up the staircase where the light seemed to be coming from. My eyes burned from the light's invasive reach. Dex's body seemed to fade before my eyes. The light was that bright. "It's coming from the tower," I heard him say quietly and strangely muffled, like I was hearing him from underwater. Then Dex did the unexplainable and walked out of my range of view and headed in the direction of the stairs and the direction of the light. "Dex!" I screamed, but the words fell short of my mouth. I ran out of the room after him, my feet landing with a faint splash as if the floor had become wet within the last few seconds, and burst into the blinding hallway. I screamed for Dex again, not knowing where to turn. I looked back into the room I had left. It was still black, where the light didn't bleach it. Then Dex's voice came from up the staircase, sounding so small and so far away. He was yelling, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. It was just sounds without words. I had two choices. I could make my way blindly to the left and head back down the stairs and get out of the building. Or I could go up the stairs toward Dex and the horrible light. I knew what he would do. He would leave me. I decided to do the opposite of that. I stormed onto the staircase, my feet tripping on the steps as I made my way up, and my arms blindly leaning onto the seeping walls for balance and support. Within seconds, I found myself on the next level, but only saw more blinding light. I remembered a desk on this level, something worth exploring if things were relatively normal, but now I could only think about finding Dex and getting us both out of there. I didn't know how it was possible for a light to cover every inch of shadow and blow out all detail to high heaven. I felt like I was running around on a strip of overexposed film. I continued up the staircase, yelling for Dex the whole way. I couldn't hear anything except my own ragged breath and screaming heartbeat. My ears felt like they were clogged with cotton balls, which disoriented me even more. The top of the staircase led to more stairs, much like those you would find in a castle turret, and I kept going up, and up. The stairs finally ended. I stepped wildly onto the landing and fell hard onto a cold wood floor. My elbows caught the brunt of my fall, and I felt the immediate burn of scraped skin and a million splinters. I slowly pushed myself up and brought my knees under me. Then the light, that horrible alien light, began to weaken. Details and shapes filled my eyes until the light had as much power as your average 150-watt bulb, and I could see exactly where I was. I immediately wished I was blind again. Chapter 14. With the light now faded to a weak glow, I found myself on the top floor of the tower. The light was actually coming from the huge lighthouse bulb itself, a round satellite dish-type glass bulb perched delicately on top of a tall white wooden base. This was the infamous cursed light that failed to illuminate the shores for passing ships year after dark year. The circular room had tall walls that were glass from waist level up and interspersed by rounded white metal beams. The rest of the room was empty, except for a single chair on the other side of the light. From my position on the ground, I could see the feet of a person occupying the chair. I wished I was staring at the bottoms of Dex's black fluvog boots with the swirl pattern at the laces, but this was not the case. I was staring at a right foot clad in a yellow rubber boot, the very same I had seen in the armoire downstairs. The toes of the boot tapped in slow motion on the floor with a piece of kelp running down it. Motionless, I absorbed the details of the scene while deciding what to do next. I did not want to look up, get up, or move. But I couldn't keep lying on the floor either. I watched the foot rise and fall soundlessly as the piece of kelp swung subtly from side to side, sticking to the sides of the boots. I knew this wasn't Dex. This was old Roddy, the lighthouse keeper. I had no time to figure out whether old Roddy was a ghost or a real person. Somehow the latter was scarier. "Aren't you going to get up?" a metallic, sick voice asked, seemingly from inside my head. I pushed myself up onto my knees and looked up and around the light fixture. I took in every detail. A man sat on a wooden chair that splintered along the armrests. The man wore the same raincoat I had seen downstairs. It was done up halfway, and a fuzzy woolen sweater poked its way out up until the neck. The hood covered the man's head, and I couldn't see his face, though I could make out the white shine of jagged-looking teeth. The teeth glinted at me. "Where's Dex?" I asked, my voice warbling. I swallowed hard. Who are you? I am the lighthouse keeper, the man replied. Again, the voice came from inside my head, and the teeth did not move. You are trespassing on my property. I'm sorry, I managed to say, but this lighthouse has been in the property of Alberto Palomino for many years now. I'm afraid you are on his property. I don't know where I got the balls to say that, and I immediately regretted the decision. Before I knew what was going on, the man stood up so fast that he knocked the chair back from under him. It landed on the floor with a deafening clatter that enveloped my ears. In a flash, dark strands of kelp flew out of the man's sleeves, for he had no hands, and wrapped their sticky, pulsing ropes around my neck. I reached up at them with my hands to pull them away, but before I could get a grip, they tightened around my larynx, and I was yanked forward at a startling speed. Unable to breathe or move, I was thrust face first into the lighthouse keeper. I was inches away from the black void of his hood, and as he spun me around and slammed the back of my head hard against the glass window, I caught a glimpse of his face in the passing beam of the light. It was the one in my nightmares. Its skinless, pussing, purple, mealy surface was so close, I could see the tiny, broken veins that snaked along the top of his shattered nose. Amazing the things you notice when you're on the verge of death. The kelp pulled tighter, and I felt my body growing limp. I couldn't feel the ground beneath my feet as they dangled helplessly. He pulled me closer to his face again. His jagged mouth, which reminded me of an old dog's with its black, puffy gums and misshapen fangs, was open, and I shut my eyes, fearing I was about to lose half of my face to it. Instead, he paused, and I was soon moving backwards again. I braced for impact as the back of my head cracked. I felt precise pain and the sharp tickle of glass as the window smashed and sprinkled down the back of my neck and coat. I felt rain and wind on my face as the window gave way behind me to the night sky. I opened my eyes and saw the moon as it peered out from behind a cloud. The moon was on its nightly orbit across the earth. I found a soothing comfort in that. It was so soothing I almost didn't notice I couldn't breathe anymore and that everything on the sides of my vision was growing black. Was this it? Was this to be my death? To be thrown out of a lighthouse by a dead man? With the last ounce of strength I had, it was tempting to laugh at the absurdity of it all. It was also tempting to just let go. The waves crashed bleakly on the cliff below, and I had no problems joining them. Blackness almost enveloped the moon now. My eyes were closing. And then I heard something amongst the crashing waves, the shattering glass, the wind, and the grunts of the lighthouse keeper, who still had his slick strands along my neck. It was Dex. He was calling my name. Perry. Perry. It floated up on the breeze and filled my ears and brought me back to life. Instead of laughing, I took the last bit of strength and kicked up with my legs. I felt the satisfying crunch of a broken jawbone as my right foot connected with Roddy's face and felt him fall back under the impact. I twisted myself forward from the waist and out of the window as the kelp fronds released my neck. I landed on the floor and took in the biggest gulp of air possible. Roddy lay on the ground, twitching. He yelped in pain, and once again I found myself wondering if he was dead or alive. Either way, I wasn't about to hang around and find out. I staggered past him toward the staircase just as one of his kelp fronds flew out and almost grasped my leg. I leaped over the snaking strand and landed with a thud on the first landing below. My shins felt shot, but I managed to keep going until I ran down a couple of flights of stairs. Far away from the dying light, everything was black, but I could still sense I was on the floor with the desk. "Dex!" I screamed. "Dex, where are you?" I heard a thump from upstairs and a sick, sopping sound. I knew Roddy was crawling down the stairs with the wet kelp trailing behind him. I ran down the stairs to the next level in a few leaps and screamed for Dex again. "Perry, I'm in here." I heard Dex's muffled cry to my left. I ran forward and hit the door to the room that we were in earlier. My feet were immediately wet. With no other light available, I fumbled for my iPhone and shone it at the door. Water was pouring out from the bottom and flooding the hallway. The door handle jiggled as if being pulled from the other side. Dex had to be in there. "Dex!" I pounded on the door. "Perry, the door's stuck. I think a pipe burst. It's flooding in here and fast," he yelled from the other side. I frantically pulled at the door, but it didn't budge. The sound of Roddy slowly coming down the stairs only added to the urgency. "Dex, there is someone else in here with us. Roddy, he tried to kill me. You have to get out. There's a window. You'll have to jump out of it. I have to go down the stairs." "Don't leave me in here," I heard him scream, and my heart dropped a little. He was finally as terrified as I was, and with good reason. "I'm sorry, Dex. I can't get in, and we have to get out now." A thump, followed by a clatter. I spun around and saw an oil lamp slowly coming down the stairs toward me. It slowed and curved as it rolled, and then proceeded to crash down the rest of the stairs to the floor below. It landed around the corner with a smashing sound and the tinkle of glass. The staircase below me lit up, and within seconds hot flames licked the walls and made their way back up the stairs toward me. "Perry, the key!" Dex cried. Of course. In my oxygen-deprived, fear-rattled brain, I had forgotten that I had the key. I heard the thump of Roddy come closer. He must have been on the landing just above me. The flames had now climbed to the landing below me, and I had the key to get us both out of here. Holding my phone with one hand, I fumbled in my pocket with the other, my stumpy fingers feeling around awkwardly for our saving grace. I pulled it out and stuck it into the lock, turning as quickly as I could. Before I could even pull on the handle, the door flew open and a huge gush of seawater flowed out into the hallway. The force knocked me over, and the stream pushed me into the bedroom across the hall. The water was about 4 feet deep, even as half of it flowed down the stairs to the lower level. I could feel the fluttering branches of hundreds of kelp slapping my body in the dark water, and I started kicking out frantically. It was black in the bedroom, but there was light coming from the flames that still climbed up the walls of the staircase as if it had been doused in gasoline. I got to my feet and called for Dex. I heard splashing and saw a silhouette appeared hunched over in the doorway. I would have thought it was Roddy had I not seen the outline of the camera being held high above his head like a trophy. Even when faced with drowning, Dex still had his priorities straight. He called out for me, and in seconds he was standing in front of me, the water only coming up to his chest. He reached over for me, his free hand coming for my shoulder. "Oh, thank God, he started. Before he could finish his sentence, and before his hand had a chance to grasp me, I felt the snaky grip of kelp around my ankle. I screamed, but it was too late. I was pulled under the water at an alarming rate. With my eyes open, I could only make out blackness through the murky water, highlighted by dancing orange fire above the surface. My lungs were filling with the salt water, choking me. In my disorienting underwater prison, I heard the muted yells of Dex and the faraway sound of glass breaking. I also heard the voice. "I've been waiting for another like you," came the disembodied metallic sounds of the lighthouse keeper through unseen underwater channels. "There just aren't enough ships anymore." I felt another kelp strand wrap around my waist and pull me farther away from the surface. As impossible as it seemed, I knew I was drowning in a bottomless ocean. And unlike earlier, the liquid that filled my lungs this time overtook me. I kicked weakly and tried in vain to wriggle out of the hold around my waist. Maybe this is what the old lady had in mind for me. Maybe death was my fate here. It caught up to me again. Suddenly I felt a pair of hands feel the top of my head. One of them grasped my hair and pulled. The pain at the sharp motion felt vague. The other hand reached under my left arm and pulled. With one giant yank, I was pulled above the surface. Dex's voice filled my ears. My eyes fluttered open, and I saw the flames that surrounded us, the heat filling the air above the cold water. I coughed up the water in my lungs and gasped fruitlessly for air, only to fill my lungs with hot, smoky dust. "Can you jump?" I heard Dex say as he pulled me to my feet. His voice seemed like a million miles away. I nodded weakly, not even sure what he was asking. He pulled me over to the porthole window, now smashed open. He wanted us to jump out and onto the cliff below. It seemed like madness, but we had no other choice. Though the water in the building started receding and no longer flowed in from the other room, the fire was unstoppable and almost growing off the water at times, as if it was fuel. If we stayed a few minutes longer, we would no doubt be burned alive, and that's just what old Roddy wanted. Dex looked out the window to assess the situation below, then turned and put his hands on both of my shoulders. He looked me square in the eye. The light from the flames danced across his wet face. He had a large scratch running down the side of his forehead. His eyes were fearful but determined as they peered mercilessly into mine. I noticed he didn't have his camera on him anymore. Maybe saving me was more important, I thought vaguely. He shook me slightly to get me to focus. I don't want to leave you, but I'll have to go first. That way I can break your fall, he said. Go limp, was all I managed to say, remembering the most important thing about taking a fall from my stuntwoman classes. He nodded, then he leaned forward and kissed my forehead in a very surreal moment. The sudden display of affection was touching and terribly out of place. And just like that, he dropped out of the window. I poked my head out of the porthole to see if he was okay. He had landed and rolled over, clutching his arm, but at least alive. He looked up at me. Come on. I began to pull myself up on the windowsill. You can't leave, the voice moaned from behind me. It sent chills down my spine, despite the roaring heat of the advancing flames. I turned around as quickly as I could in the water. The lighthouse keeper stood in the doorway, his outline stark against the orange light. The flames now snaked into the room along the door frame and steadily climbed the walls like pyrotechnic hands searching for something to ignite. I knew I had little time before the flames engulfed me completely. I also knew I couldn't leave just yet. Though he was completely across the room, I had no doubt his kelp tentacles could easily ensnare me again with a flick of his wrists. No one would save me this time. I had to know how this was going to end. Why me? I asked. Why did you start coming for me, in my dreams, to this place? What do you want? I shouted over the roar of the flames. He grinned, white teeth against the black void. I was told you would listen. Who told you? I barked as the fire came closer. I could hear Dex yelling for me to jump from outside. She told me you would listen and that you would come, that you'd help me, that you'd free me. I've been so lonely. I've been waiting for someone like you. His head lowered as if he was genuinely sad. I felt nothing for him. You'll have to keep waiting, I said, determination rising in my voice. He looked up with a sneer and the kelp came flying my way. With less than a second to react, I jumped up on the window and launched myself off the building. I was going to land to the left of Dex, and for a second it looked like a group of bushes might break my fall, but that wasn't the case. I managed to get in landing position in midair and then go limp as my legs, knees bent, slammed into the ground. Thankfully, the grass was wet and soft, and I was able to propel myself off of it and go into a low roll. I rolled for 2 revolutions before I sprang up to my feet again. I looked behind me and saw the cliff end less than a meter away. Dex, who had been yelling this whole time, ran over and grabbed my arm. Are you okay? He asked frantically. I was okay, so far. I looked up at the porthole to see old Roddy's shadow standing there, looking down on us. The flames now had completely taken over the room and were licking at the edges of his raincoat. Do you see him? I whispered to Dex, not taking my eyes off of the horrific sight. Yes, I do, Dex replied quietly, and to my relief. As flames engulfed old Roddy, he extended his arm out of the window and pointed at the sea, just as he had in my dreams. I turned to look. There was nothing there except the steady, beaming swirl of the Tillamook lighthouse doing her duty offshore. I looked back up and saw him slowly disintegrate into the fire. Dex turned to me. We've got to get out of here. He grabbed my hand and scampered over to the nearby bushes. He reached in and pulled out his camera. He must have tossed it outside before jumping out of the window. The bulb for the light had broken, but other than that, it looked like his gamble turned out okay. With the camera safely tucked under his arm, we were off and running northward, skirting around the lighthouse as far away as we could. The sound of sirens began to fill the air in the distance, and the severity of the situation hit me. Uncle Al's lighthouse would burn to the ground because of us. How the hell were we ever going to explain this? We slipped and slid down the cliff and made it to the dunes when a large explosion threw both Dex and me into the sand. Instinctively, I covered my neck with my hands as small pieces of debris rained down. We lay there for a minute. I could feel Dex on the wet, crunchy sand beside me and heard him move, obviously alive. When I saw the fragments of the blown lighthouse had stopped falling, I lifted up my head and looked at him. He was covering his head with his camera, which was surely embedded with deep grains of sand now. From my shattered lens last week to his scratched-up camera today, this place was not audio-visual friendly. "Are you okay?" I asked. I tapped him with my hand. He rolled over on his back, groaning and wincing, with his eyes shut in discomfort. "Where did you learn to roll like that?" he muttered, his voice low and broken. "What?" I asked, spitting out sand. He opened his eyes wide as the flames from the explosion danced in his dark pupils. I rolled over on my back, lying beside him, and watched the night sky as the flames from the lighthouse danced high into the darkness. The rain stopped. You could hear the crackling flames and sirens that were still far enough away. We lay there, watching the light show while catching our breath. Finally, Dex replied, "When you jumped out of the window. And when it exploded, I was ready to cover you, but you had already propelled yourself across the grass and were all in protective ninja mode or something." "I've taken some classes," I answered breathlessly. "Uh-huh." He gasped and took in a deep breath. I rolled over and looked at him. He rolled his head to the side and looked at me. I found myself speechless. I honestly couldn't even get over the fact that we were alive. He slowly nodded. He looked sleepy, but I saw the understanding beneath his drooping lids. I felt like I could just stare at him and he would just know everything I was thinking. He reached over and grabbed my hand. He squeezed it and held it in the air above us, about as victorious a gesture as either of us could manage. I gave him a small smile. "Are you hurt at all?" he asked. I didn't feel anything until now. I wanted to stay in my sandy grave, but I knew I had cut the back of my head when I was thrown into the glass. I felt the bones in my shins throbbing, my elbows burned, and my throat felt raw from where the kelp squeezed me. Also, my lungs wheezed, my eyes stung, and in general, my whole body felt like a truck had hit it. "I'm okay," I said, though. He giggled. "Oh, shit. Aren't you just Mary fucking Wonder Woman? I think I broke my fucking ankle from the fall, not to mention when I cracked my head on the stairs." He reached up and rubbed the cut that ran along his forehead. When he stopped laughing to himself, he took in a deep breath and closed his eyes. The sirens were close now, and I could see red lights illuminating the trees in the distance. "What do we do now?" I asked, hoping I could just close my eyes, too. Maybe I would magically appear in my bed at home and everything would be dealt with. Dex grunted. "I mean, what do we say?" I continued. "Do we go back to Uncle Al's? Do we stay here and wait for help? How do we explain to Al, to anyone, what the hell just happened? By the way, some dead fisherman attacked me and blew up your lighthouse?" "Dead?" he scoffed, eyes still closed. I nodded. "He was dead, Dex. I mean, he wasn't alive. He wasn't like us." Even my truthful explanation sounded weak. How could I even begin to explain what happened to anyone when I couldn't even explain it to the only person who was there? "He's dead now," he said without a trace of interest. "And I honestly don't think that should even be mentioned. No one was supposed to be in their lighthouse at any rate, let alone some batshit crazy Captain Highlander." He opened his eyes and rolled over on his side to look at me. "There will be no trace of him, whether he was already dead or not." "We'll have to lie." "No, we'll tell the police what we were doing there, and tell them I flicked a cigarette down the hall, and that started everything. Places like this have all sorts of fuels and chemicals still inside them." For emphasis, he fished a package of cigarettes out of his pant cargo pockets, scrunching up his face in pain as he did so, and pulled a cigarette out. I noticed how shaky his hands were before I really noticed what he was doing. "You don't smoke," I told him. I hadn't seen him smoke at all this weekend, let alone smell it on him. "I do and I don't. My toothpick friend comes out when I'm in quitting mode," he spoke. The cigarette bobbed between his subtly duck-like lips. He pulled out a gold lighter with his other hand from some other unseen pocket and lit the cigarette in one trained swoop. He took in a deep puff and blew the smoke out in rings that joined the flames in the sky. With a whoop, the urban sound of a police siren or an ambulance, I often confused them, filled the air and echoed out of the trees. Dex coughed. "Okay, time to do this." He got to his feet without making a sound, but I could tell he was in a lot of pain. He put his hand on his lower back and looked down at me. From his jaunty stance and wiggling cigarette, he reminded me of the silhouette of the Captain Morgan's pirate. "Do you want me to carry you?" he asked. I didn't know if he was belittling me or just being polite. I decided on the former just in case. "No," I said forcefully and sat up. My abs burned with the crunch, especially the sides that bore the brunt of the kelp's pull earlier. I got to my knees and then slowly stood upright. I knew the hit on the back of my head would probably make me feel woozier than normal. I didn't dare touch it, though, in case Dex made a big deal about it. All I wanted to do was get home. And get to work. Oh, God. Work. The meeting? That thought alone had me starting to sway a bit. Dex reached out and steadied me with one hand and leaned down. "Can you make it? I wasn't kidding about carrying you," he said. "Well, it's better to be safe than sorry with you, isn't it?" I thought. I shook my head, took in an invigorating breath of half ocean air and half burning fuel, and straightened up. The top of the embankment now swarmed with people in uniform and emergency vehicles. I guess a lighthouse explosion was one of the most exciting things to ever happen here. And now we were caught in the middle of it. Chapter 15. I thought talking to the curious police officers, EMTs, firefighters, and the local news reporter, plus Uncle Al and the twins, would have shed a lot of doubt on our story, but they all seemed content to buy it. One firefighter said a fire starts every week because of leftover engine oil and whatnot. What I think he meant was that drunken sailors got stupid, but as long as they believed what happened without questioning us, we were golden. And then there was Uncle Al's reaction. I felt extremely guilty for destroying his historic lighthouse. None of this would have happened had his stupid niece not shown up at his door with some slightly unhinged filmmaker. But Uncle Al looked nothing short of relieved. I guess he really did find the place evil, the cradle of some demonic, horrible spirit. I understood how right he was about that, and I think he did too. While we were explaining what happened, I noticed he had a suspicious look in his eyes. It wasn't accusatory, but rather a look of knowing there was more to the story than we were telling everyone. It actually calmed me, as if he was in on the secret without knowing. Either way, Dex and I were very lucky to not only walk out of there alive, as people kept telling us, oh, if they only knew, but also to be excused by the authorities without any further inquiries. That's not to say the ambulance attendants excused us so readily. They had to do a thorough once-over on both of us to make sure we didn't sustain any burns or injuries. Dex and I sat beside each other on the back bumper of the ambulance as the two medics poked and prodded. Dex's female attendant asked him if he was taking any medication. Dex hesitated and then said a name I couldn't pronounce, something Zapine? The woman did a double take. "It's for heartburn," Dex said, voice flat and eyes steady, until the attendant just nodded and went back to her business. The hard-nosed Chinese guy that I had was making me nervous. He touched me in places, asking if it hurt, and then gave me the look as if he didn't believe me. Half the time it did actually hurt, but I knew the more I admitted, the more they would want to take me to a hospital for further inspection. All I wanted to do was get back home. I started to regret sticking around and wished Dex and I had just booked it back to the house and played ignorant. While Dex's attendant left to go get something out of the front of the ambulance, my head was tilted back rather roughly. The guy, I think his name was Jesse, peered at my neck suspiciously. "How did this happen?" he asked, referring to my neck bruises. I could see Dex out of the corner of my eye, craning his head to look over in my direction. We never had a chance to explain what had happened to us earlier. I guess he never knew what happened to me at the top of the tower, just as I still didn't know what happened to him in that room. I had to think quickly. Sexual asphyxiation. You ever tried it? You should. Though my head was tilted back, and I couldn't see Jesse's face, I know he was shocked. In fact, I could tell he looked over at Dex for an explanation. I hoped Dex would throw the attendant off this trail. "It's a little game we play," Dex said, his voice laced with subtle sarcasm. I wanted to high-five him for his answer. "You know how it is." "Oh," the attendant replied and brought my head forward. He suspiciously looked me in the eyes. I gave him a look as if he was the one who was a freak. I nearly made some caustic David Carradine remark when he slid his hand down the back of my head. He stopped it where my hair was wet from being smashed against the glass. He took his hand away slowly, and we both stared at it in the ugly light of the ambulance. It was red with blood. I looked over at Dex. He was staring at me, eyes wide and mouth dropped a little, but didn't say anything, even though I could see words were forming at the tip of his tongue. Jesse held his hands in front of my face and said matter-of-factly, "You're bleeding, and you have glass in your hair." At this moment, I could have chosen to cover up the matter with some inarticulate lie, or I could flat out tell him I didn't know how it happened. "That was my fault," Dex suddenly spoke up. "I panicked when I pushed us out the window. I guess I didn't check that it was a clean break." I managed to smile at Jesse and didn't risk looking at Dex in case Jesse caught on. Jesse shook his head and motioned for me to go farther into the ambulance. "Is she gonna be okay?" Dex asked. I could almost hear a hint of boredom in his tone. Evidently, Jesse heard it too. It gave him the stink eye. "I'm gonna clean out the wound and check for a concussion. I think you're free to go now." Dex shrugged and walked away. As Jesse sat me down on a stretcher, I could see Uncle Al and the twins coming up to Dex. They all looked my way, and Dex began explaining something to them. Then Jesse closed the ambulance doors, shutting me inside the small, sterile room with him. I felt very uncomfortable. He stopped in front of me and narrowed his eyes. There was something very vindictive about this guy, like it was his life's mission to mistrust everyone he meets. "Is that what really happened?" he asked seriously. "What, with my head?" I wasn't about to tell him the truth, but I had a feeling he wouldn't have been satisfied with it anyway. Or he would have recommended I be sent to a different kind of hospital. He put a stiff hand on my shoulder. I eyed it with disdain, but he didn't remove it. "Did your boyfriend hurt you?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. Jesse, the attendant, looked annoyed at my outburst and took a step back. "He's not my boyfriend," I said. "He's my partner. I mean, sort of. And like we said, we were filming in the lighthouse hoping to get a glimpse of something supernatural. When all hell broke loose, the only thing we could do was bust out of the window. I may have hit my head when I went through. I was probably concentrating on not, dying, and didn't notice." "May have," he said slowly, his head moving from side to side as if he had a slow-motion tic. "Look, are you gonna fix my head or not? Isn't that your job?" I spat out wearily. I was growing more exhausted by the minute, and my brain swirled with a million events that I refused to process. "Fine, just trying to help." He flipped my head down and proceeded to sift through my thick hair, mopping crap up with swabs and pads that reeked of alcohol and stung like hell. Minuscule pieces of glass rained down to the sticky floor like tiny snowflakes. 10 minutes later, he finished with a hardcore Band-Aid and a square of gauze he stuck awkwardly at the back of my head. This would go down well at work tomorrow. I could just imagine Frida going, "Well, Perry, the job would have been yours, but we decided to go with someone who didn't look like she drank a liter of tequila over the weekend and consequently hit her head on a bathtub during some kinky sex game." "Can I go now?" I asked impatiently. "You really should go to the hospital to get checked out for a concussion," he answered. "Maybe I will when I get back to Portland tonight. I just want to go home." "You won't be able to drive." I rolled my eyes. Well, lucky for me, he's driving. I gestured in the direction of the closed doors, hoping Dex was still outside. I felt so confined inside this fluorescent-lit doctor's office on wheels. "Technically, he shouldn't be driving either," he said morbidly. "I'm sure he's—" "Not on his medication, anyway," Jesse finished. "Medication?" I must have looked confused because Jesse raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Oh, you didn't know about his medication?" he mused casually. "Olanzapine is a very powerful antipsychotic and typically intensifies when patients partake in smoking." My heart grew cold. Dex was taking antipsychotics? I almost joked to myself on how they didn't seem to work very well when I realized the reality of it. "Antipsychotic?" "Primarily used to treat schizophrenia. You don't know this man very well, do you?" "That's none of your business," I snapped and stood up. I fought the wooziness that tried to take me over. I walked hunched over to the doors and opened them. I was met with the cold night air. The fire was pretty much contained, and except for a few glowing embers here and there and some leftover strands of foundation, the lighthouse was reduced to a black pile of smoldering mush. Uncle Al and Dex stood beside each other, facing the ambulance. When they saw me, both their faces lit up. Al's was one of fatherly love and concern, but Dex's face... I had to look at him with new eyes. I stood still at the base of the ambulance, wanting to observe him from a distance. He shoved his hands in the pockets of his slick, slightly oversized raincoat, which still had particles of sand sticking to it. I noticed now how it was slightly too big for him, making him look shorter than he was. Dirt had splashed across his black fluvogs and up onto his gray cargo pants. He stared straight at me, head tilted down in the usual fashion, maybe wondering what I was thinking or doing. His cheekbones cast dark shadows down the sides of his face. His long mouth was closed and twitching slightly, snaking across his jaw. His eyes were intense but curious as they stared back at me, hard little dots searching in his deep-set sockets. His black brows inched toward each other and deepened his omnipresent frown line. The rest of his wide forehead contracted, as did the freshly bandaged cut. A longish strand of wet black hair had flopped forward and stuck to it. Slowly, he opened his mouth and stuck out his tongue. It was about as large as his mouth and lay flat against his chin. His eyes never changed. Jesus, who was this guy? My pulse quickened. I started to feel woozy again. "What's wrong, Perry?" Uncle Al asked, coming for me. I shook my head and bent over slightly, hands on my knees. "She should go to the hospital, just in case," I heard Jesse say behind me. I slowly turned. He stood on the bumper and stared at Dex. Dex looked back at Jesse, slowly put his tongue back into his mouth, and casually extended his middle finger at him. "Okay, Perry," Al said, putting his arm around me and not noticing the Dex-Jesse scene. "Let's take you to the hospital." "I'm not fucking going anywhere," I cried out, the bitterness in my voice surprising me. Everyone looked shocked. Al took his hand off of my shoulder. Dex remained in the background and put his hand back inside his pocket. "All right, we are done here," Jesse said as he rolled his eyes and slammed the door shut. I let out a sigh of relief as he walked to the front of the ambulance and got in. I looked at Al apologetically. "I'm sorry, Uncle Al," I said meekly. "I'm fine, really. I just want to go home. I'm sure Mom will be sending me off to the hospital anyway as soon as she sees this war wound on my head." He sighed, but nodded. "Okay, you're old enough to make your own choices, I guess." He looked at both Dex and me. "Come on, I've got the truck here, if the boys haven't already left. I'll take you back, and we can all forget that this disaster ever happened." Those were the sweetest words I could have ever heard. Back at the house, I packed up as quickly as I could without overexerting myself. Turns out it was midnight. My iPhone died a horrible death in the flood, so I hadn't known the time. Chalk up an electronic expense for me, and another reason why the promotion was so important. I called my parents and explained that I would most likely be coming home in the middle of the night, but not to wait up for me. Of course I knew they would. And, of course, my father was yelling at me over how irresponsible I was. Thankfully, Al got on the phone and calmed his brother down, explaining mostly everything and leaving out the injured part. I figured my dad asked about Dex, too, because Al said, "She seems to be in good hands. Yes, he's a trustworthy guy." Speaking of the trustworthy guy, Dex had actually been in the bathroom the whole time I talked on the phone. It would have been weird at any other time, but after what Jesse had said, I started to worry. Was Dex really psychotic? I mean, they wouldn't call them antipsychotics if he wasn't. And if he was, what kind of psychotic was he? Schizophrenic? Did he hear voices? Was he suicidal? Was he dangerous? I quietly scooted down the hall and paused outside the bathroom door. I was about to knock when, "I'll be out in a second," Dex said behind the door, sensing me. "Oh, okay," I said, feeling kind of embarrassed. I stepped back and leaned against the wall. I would just tell him I really had to go. The door swung open. He had changed into new clothes and was carrying his duffel bag in one hand. He raised one eyebrow at me, a wry smile creeping on one corner of his mouth. "Checking up on me?" "No," I shook my head, hoping I sounded convincing. "I have to go." "There are 2 bathrooms," he said, walking past me. I caught the scent of freshly applied aftershave in the air. His face did look smoother. His stash was neatly trimmed. I quickly hopped in the bathroom. Now was as good of a time as ever to examine my own face. It was not pretty, unless you considered the living dead to be pretty. I can say for certain that I did not. My reflection was ghastly. I was so white that I could have been transparent. Even my freckles, which normally stood out across my nose, were almost gone as if they were hiding in fright. The mascara that once covered my eyelashes had migrated beneath my eyes. My eyes lacked their usual sparkle. They looked lifeless and dull. And my neck was atrocious. The bruises from the kelp, which did suspiciously look like handprints, were a horrid mix of blue, purple, and yellow. I would have to wear a turtleneck tomorrow, and a hat, and sunglasses. I was going to look like Yoko Ono at my meeting. I hoped Frida wasn't a Beatles fan. I sighed, then caught myself. Here I worried about my job, when 2 hours ago I almost lost my life to things that I couldn't explain or even let myself think about. It just didn't seem real. When I emerged, I didn't look any better, but Dex was in the car, waiting to leave. I gave Uncle Al the biggest hug I could manage and told him how thankful I was for everything he did for me this weekend. He walked me to the door, and just as I was leaving, put his hand gently on my shoulder. "Perry," he said, briefly looking down as if he wasn't sure how to continue. "I know there's more to the story. Of what happened tonight. More than anything, I am glad you were okay, but if you ever want to talk about it to someone who understands, I'm just a phone call or a car ride away." I gave him the most gracious smile. "Thank you, Uncle Al." And though I knew I might possibly phone him to discuss what happened, there was no way in hell I would return to the Oregon coast for a very, very long time. I walked through the midnight air to Dex's SUV. It felt like ages ago that we had our heart-to-heart on the side of the road. I say heart-to-heart because it was the most I had really talked to Dex and learned something about him. Now we had the whole car ride back, and even though I had so many things I wanted to ask him, I didn't know how. I opened the door. Dex sat in the driver's seat, fiddling intently with his camera. I threw my bag in the car and climbed in. "Is it okay?" I asked hopefully. He sucked in the corner of his mouth. "I don't know. The LCD is cracked, but I'm praying that the memory card will be fine." "That's the same that happened with my camera last week. Lens cracked, but the memory card worked." He nodded in a way that made me question whether he had actually heard me. He tossed the camera behind him into the back seat as if it was completely worthless, put the car into drive, and his foot to the pedal. Uncle Al's house, the wild coast, and the wild nightmares disappeared behind us, swallowed by the darkness. We didn't speak for about 10 minutes. I could hear Elton John singing "Someone Saved My Life Tonight" very quietly from the speakers. I found the lyrics to be especially poignant. I looked up at Dex, his face slightly aglow from the instrument panel. I could see he knew I was looking at him, but he kept his eyes on the road. His eyes looked sad, or maybe just tired. "How are you doing?" I inquired, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. "Great," was his answer. As usual, I couldn't tell if he was being facetious or not. Either way, I got the "don't talk to me" vibe. I smiled weakly and leaned against the window, the reflections from inside the car making the passing darkness seem abstract. I must have dozed off for a while because when I came to, a small puddle of drool had formed on my right shoulder. "You snore," Dex said. Sheepishly, I raised my head and wiped the drool off of me. "I drool, too," I added. I eyed the clock. 2 a.m. I had no idea how I was going to survive the coming day. As I mulled over my plan to act normal at work and my plan to win them over at the meeting and get the promotion, which so far consisted of just acting enthusiastic and agreeing with everything they said, Dex let out a small sigh. "I'm sorry," he said. I eyed him, surprised at his admittance. "For everything," he continued when I didn't speak. "This wasn't the way things were supposed to happen. I mean, in Wine Babes, I've never been attacked by killer grapes, as cool as that sounds." I closed my eyes and leaned back. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is my fault. I obviously didn't think this through. I mean, you're just a young girl with a promising life ahead of her, and I drag you off to some haunted lighthouse? I mean, fuck. What the hell was I thinking?" I could see flashes of remorse behind his eyes. My heart ached, but just a little. "Obviously, my life isn't all that promising if I agreed to go off to some haunted lighthouse with you," I reminded him quickly. "And you barely know me," he continued, not hearing me. "You don't know me, and I don't know you, and I convinced you this would be a fan-fucking-tastic idea." You almost died tonight. You could have died. I straightened up and leaned closer to him. You almost died, too? Dex shook his head. I just didn't realize what we were up against. I'm sorry for making you go up those stairs. I know you wanted nothing more than to get out of there, and I should have let you. And then I should have followed you. If I really wanted to, I could have gotten past you. Oh, fuck. We should never have gone back in there. Well, we did, and we both decided that, remember? Dex didn't look convinced, but he didn't protest either. He fell silent, and his mouth was firmly set. I'm afraid to ask what happened to you, he finally said. I was afraid to answer. I didn't want to recall any of it, even though it was very fresh in my head, as well as on my throat. But I couldn't keep it all inside, either. If I did, you could bet I would need Dex's pills very soon. Which reminded me, I wanted to ask him about that, but how on earth do you bring up something so personal? By the way, rumor has it you're a psycho. And so I told Dex exactly what happened in full detail, from the rubber boots old Roddy was wearing, to hearing Dex's voice when I was being hung out the window, to what he had said before I leaped out of the building. She told me you would listen and that you would come. I've been waiting for another like you. That's what he said. I don't know who she is, but the only thing that makes sense, if you can call it that, is that he was talking about the lady, the creepy clown lady. Dex didn't say anything, so I attempted to lighten the mood. And then I gave a fantastic one-liner along the lines of, the only thing you're getting is death. He didn't even crack a smile. I wondered when I would see that perpetual smirk again. I was starting to prefer that Dex to this gravely serious one. And that's what happened, I added, hoping he would say something. He chewed on his lip for a second before saying, You say that so casually, like this happens to you every weekend. Well, it kind of has. He shot me a look that made me shrink back a little. I'm taking this seriously, Perry. I wish you would, too. Well, I'm sorry I use humor to get through tough situations. This whole fucking situation is absurd, and I don't even know how I'm supposed to process what just happened, let alone feel it. It's just so impossible. It doesn't feel real, and in all honesty, how can it be real? It can't. It just can't. It can't. It can't. It can't. It can't. It can't. It can't. I started laughing at the absurdity of it all. A loud, howling laugh that shook my face and caused tears to run down it. A few wires in my brain began to snap. One by one, I could feel my thoughts unraveling as the face of old Roddy came back. The feeling of my head going through glass, the stickiness of the kelp tentacles, the cold water as it drowned my lungs. Snap, snap, snap. My emotions were in an out-of-control funnel. My thoughts circled from reality to reality. I kept laughing and laughing and laughing until Dex pulled the car over to the side of the road. He put it in park and flicked on the interior light. Perry, he said cautiously. He moved his hand over towards my knee. I whacked it off impulsively and cackled, Who's the crazy one now, you or me? Dex frowned, looking utterly lost. I couldn't blame him. I had completely lost control. Shh, it's okay, he whispered and reached for me again. I didn't hit him this time, though I suddenly had the strong urge to punch him in the face. His eyes widened for a second as if he knew what I was thinking. Perry, calm down. Calm down, I spat out. Calm down? You're the psychotic one, Dex. Better give me one of your pills, son. He pursed his lips, frown line deepening. That's right, I exclaimed. I know what olanzapine is. When were you going to tell me that I was pairing up with a schizo? I know what I said was mean, but I didn't care. I laughed away the guilt. I felt this huge surge of energy, like trapped, tormenting emotions rising up from my belly. If I stopped laughing, I would probably start screaming. He took in what I said without a fuss. It was like he didn't hear me. Instead, he turned to face me and moved in closer until his face was right up in mine. I watched him in slow motion. I saw his eyes turn from a flat brown shade to a vivid, sparkling mahogany. His pupils contracted, turning into tiny pricks of black. They turned mean, very mean. Hey! He screamed so loudly that my ears felt numb. I could feel tiny droplets of his spit fall on my cheek. The impact of his voice literally stopped my heart. Get a hold of yourself! I don't know if you've ever had someone scream right in your face, but let me tell you, it's the most terrifying experience. In one action, I felt like I experienced all of the rage that I imagined tore Dex inside, and it was directed at me. I stopped laughing. I stopped breathing, I stopped blinking, I stopped moving. Full stop. Dex continued to look at me, eyes boring through mine with so much power and so much hate, it made my stomach queasy. Then he exhaled and looked down. When he looked back up, his eyes were full of apology and remorse again. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I had to." I expected him to move away and give me some breathing room, but he kept his head right there. I assumed he wanted to further torment me, but he looked so compassionate, such a 180 from 2 seconds ago, that I knew he was trying to make sure I was all right. It reminded me of the film Good Will Hunting when Robin Williams says, "It's not your fault," over and over again to Matt Damon until he snaps and breaks down. I had already snapped. With the tears that started to rush to my eyes, I knew it was time to break down. I kept my eyes open and unblinking for as long as I could until they were so full of tears that I had to shut them. Yesterday I was too embarrassed to cry in front of Dex, but now I didn't care at all. And my tears were exactly what he wanted. I began to sob and bawl, letting out everything from tonight, everything from last week, and probably everything from the last 22 years. Dex watched me for a few seconds, then put both arms around my shoulders and gently pulled me into him. I resisted slightly at first, not wanting the fuss, but then just gave up and buried my head into his chest. I was probably getting snot all over him, but I didn't care. He didn't say anything now to calm me or make me stop crying. He just held me, which was more effective than anything. It made me realize in the back of my wrecked head how much I needed affection, that human touch. It's something you don't really think about until you're reminded how much you are lacking it. And now I realized how much I wanted it, needed it from him. This topsy-turvy medicated man who only entered my life a few days ago. I still didn't know him, but I felt like I didn't need to. They say that people who experience extreme situations together develop an unspoken bond between them. No matter how unsettling it felt to know he was a potential madman, no matter how frustrating it was to deal with him from minute to minute, no matter how much I knew he would go back to Seattle in an hour, there was a line of unseen energy, a bond, drawing me to him. And selfishly, naively, I hoped he felt it too. His neck smelled like that delicious aftershave and natural musk. Maybe I could stay like this forever. But my tears slowed, and my breath and heart resumed to a reasonable rate. And I think I soaked his jacket front. I reluctantly pulled away and grimaced. I fished out a damp tissue from my pocket and dabbed it up. "Sorry," I whispered, embarrassed. He looked down and smirked. "Hey, I've had worse things on me. Goat shit, regurgitated wine. This is nothing." I couldn't help but smile. I quickly wiped the now soggy tissue across my eyes and nose. His face remained only a hand's length away from mine, and I didn't want to look completely wretched. I noticed he still had his arms around me, so obviously I didn't look that bad. That said, he was crazy, so... Something came across his eyes. They started to go back into his sexy, sleepy default mode, and his brows twitched almost painfully, as if he remembered something. He took his hands off of me while looking slightly abashed. It felt like there was a weird tension hanging in the air, and he just noticed. He cleared his throat and averted his eyes. "You'll be okay now." "Sure," I muttered, looking at my mascara-smudged hand. "Believe me, I've been there. I've seen stuff. You've let it all out. It can't do any more damage. It's when you don't let it out, well..." He put his hand in his pocket, produced a prescription bottle of pills, and shook it for effect. "What happened?" I asked cautiously. How much stuff did he have in his pockets? "That's a story for another time," he said simply. I sensed a humorous inflection in his voice, even though his eyes remained blank. "Oh," I said stupidly. "I'm not schizophrenic, just so you know. Just sort of bipolar." "That makes sense." He rolled his eyes. The medication can really mess with your head. And not to mention the fucking gigantic gut I get. Too much and I resemble Tom Arnold. Too little and, well, I'm really not crazy if that's what you're worried about. I'm not worried, and you don't look like Tom Arnold. You should get some up-to-date analogies, though. That's because I'm only taking just enough to get by. And even with the minimal dosage, I get this. He grabbed his stomach. He had barely anything to grab. Women love this, he said with a wink. I'm sure your girlfriend does, I said quietly. You'd think, he joked. But she just nags me to go to the gym. Have you ever been to a gym? It's the gayest shit ever. I went for the first 6 months of us dating until I got tired of paying someone to torture me. I'm sure she understands. He shook his head. You've seen what she looks like. She's got some pretty high standards. Anyway, she doesn't know I'm still on medication. That surprised me, and I searched his face to see if he was kidding. His deadpan expression didn't aid me at all. You're joking. How could she not know? He shrugged. Because she doesn't. Doesn't she see you taking pills? I can be discreet. I doubt it would make a difference. I narrowed my eyes at this new information. I already felt quite biased, but now I knew Jen was a bitch. And you live with her, I said incredulously. Uh-huh, he said casually. Anyway, change in the top now. You're gonna be okay? I don't know. I sniffled and sat back in the seat. That was a rhetorical question, which means yes, you are. He eyed the clock. We should probably start heading back. Just try and let me know if you feel like laughing hysterically again, so I can turn up the volume. Dex started the engine and brought the car back onto the highway. I felt exhausted and slightly relieved at the same time. I closed my eyes and had almost drifted asleep when a question pulled at me. Dex? Yes, ma'am. What did you mean when you said you've been there? It seems so. Go to sleep. Okay. I sighed sleepily. And soon, everything faded to black. Chapter 16. I woke up from my short, dreamless sleep as I felt Dex's car come to a rolling stop. We parked on the street in front of my house. Even in the dark, with leaves scattering in the wind and tossing the thin branches of our cherry trees about, it looked like the nicest place on earth. Home, sweet home, Dex said. I felt awkward. Did I hug him goodbye, shake his hand? Both seemed strangely inappropriate. Feels like the end of a first date, doesn't it? He remarked, a smirk deepening one corner of his mouth. I blushed furiously. Yeah, I guess. Amused, he opened his arms and said, Come here. I leaned over and hugged him. He squeezed me very tight, grunting humorously. I squeezed back, not wanting to let go, but also not wanting to give him the wrong idea. The wrong idea being that I wanted to keep touching him. Eventually I pulled away and looked to the side. Hey, he whispered as he slipped his hand under my chin and tipped it up. I had no choice but to meet his eyes. They danced in the dark. You okay? I stared at his lips, my breath deepening. The urge to kiss him grew frighteningly strong, so much it surprised me. I obviously wasn't okay, but for different reasons than he thought. I saved face by closing my eyes and nodding. I'm good. Satisfied, he let go of my chin and sat back in his seat. Fabulous. I quickly opened the door and hopped out of the car before I did or said something stupid. I heard scenes from an Italian restaurant faintly playing from the speakers, which immediately reminded me of his sing-along session in the car yesterday. Felt so long ago. I must have smiled involuntarily because he handed me my bag from behind the seat and said, Want me to start singing again? I'll sing you the whole CD. My Life, Piano Man, She's Always a Woman. I could tell he was joking, but I secretly wanted nothing more. I swallowed hard and gave him a shy smile. Guess this is goodbye? For now, he said. Go and get some proper sleep and rock their fucking faces off at the meeting tomorrow. I'll call you when I've got something interesting to say. Sounds good. Bye, Dex. I was about to close the door when he stopped me. Wait. He reached behind him into his bag and pulled out his newsboy cap. Wear this tomorrow. It'll cover up your brain hole. And you'll look really cool. I took it from him, plopped it on my head, and tipped the brim. Thanks. He saluted me with his fingers as I shut the door. I turned and walked towards the house, hearing the car drive off. I looked behind me, and he was gone. I sighed, pausing at the front door to gather my thoughts before unlocking it and returning to my old life. As one can imagine, the next day turned into utter madness times a billion. First of all, I came home to find my mother asleep in my bed, apparently waiting up for me. Thankfully, Dex had given me his cap, which covered up the wound on the back of my head, and I did not need that to freak out my mother. Of course, she bombarded me with a ton of worried mother questions that I easily deflected by saying how badly I needed the sleep, which was true. However, it didn't make a lick of difference in the end, considering I woke up feeling like absolute shit. Every bone and muscle in my body ached to high heaven. I couldn't even bend down to tie my boots and had to opt for ballet flats. Those, coupled with a turtleneck to hide the ever-deepening bruises on my neck and Dex's cap on my head, made me look an awful lot like Yoko Ono after all. My choice of wardrobe was the least of my worries, though, because along with my physical pain, I was also in a state of mental shock. I was so tired and exhausted to my core that I was borderline delirious. Even forming sentences seemed to be a challenge, which did not bode well for answering the phones. Even 2 Red Bulls couldn't help my jumbled thoughts, although they did elevate my heart rate to cardiac arrest status, which doubled by the time I walked into my meeting. But through crazy luck or the pity of the universe, I somehow not only got through the meeting with Frida and the head honcho, John Danvers, but I won them over and got the promotion. Yeah, I know. I can't explain it myself, except that I managed to project a very professional and enthusiastic image, and even showed them some of the advertising plans I created back at the university. The position was just for a production coordinator, which was a pretty stressful and lowly job, but it was still better and more relevant to me than being stuck in reception. Plus, it paid $3 extra an hour, and I would get benefits. I was on cloud 9 for the rest of the day. Literally, all the painkillers I was popping, plus the lack of shut-eye, made me feel like I was floating away to La La Land. My position started the next Monday, which meant all this week I had to train my replacement. Turns out they had the temp who subbed for me last week in mind, which in turn meant a fairly easy week for me. I could just make the other person do all the work. Easy is what I needed. With my brain and body all jumbled, I needed things to go as smoothly as possible. I wanted to put the weekend behind me more than anything and start focusing on a new path. The longer I engaged in the everyday swing of normal life, the more absurd the idea of being a ghost blogger became. Plus, I hadn't heard from Dex. I know he said he'd call if he knew something, but still, I guess a part of me hoped he would call anyway. Later that evening, I went onto my Facebook to check his profile, like the snoop I am. I found no evidence he had logged on recently, but people had written on his wall during our absence. Some guys, some girls, mostly inside jokes and potential plans. It felt weird knowing Dex had a life outside of me and the lighthouse, as egotistical and stupid as that sounds. It only hammered home that Dex was still just a man. A befuddling man, but just a man in the end. A man with a hot wine babe for a girlfriend, an interesting and varied job, a nice voice, a social life, and a sordid past. A handsome, beguiling man whose eyes read your very soul and whose smirk held you in contempt. A man I tried my hardest not to think about. That was easier said than done. Ada kept bringing him up around the dinner table. "I think he looks creepy," Ada said haughtily between petite bites of her roast. "I was starting to doubt if you'd ever come back." "Thanks, Ada," I muttered, glaring at her. "Well, it would have been nice if we had had a chance to meet him," my mom complained wistfully, "instead of having to stare at him from a distance." "Yeah, well, I thought maybe you'd embarrass me," I replied truthfully. "Oh, whatever, as you would say. Why would that matter?" my mom said, exchanging a look with my father, who was silent, as he normally was whenever there was food in front of him. "Because she has the hots for him," Ada interjected. I rolled my eyes. "Oh, please, I just met the guy." She wagged her fork at me. "I saw the way you were ogling his Facebook pictures." She turned to my mother. "He has a girlfriend, too." My mouth dropped. "How do you know that?" "Maybe I know how to use a search engine better than you can," she answered primly. "Perry," my mother teased, looking at me. "You do like this man." "No," I exclaimed and nearly threw down my fork. "The lady doth protest too much," Ada smirked. "You don't even know what you're quoting there, Blondie," I shot back. "Girls," my dad said sternly but gently, "let's let Perry relax a bit. It's not every weekend that you blow up my brother's lighthouse." I couldn't tell if my dad was actually angry, as was usually the case with him. I had, after all, blown up his brother's lighthouse, which couldn't be taken lightly. Even though it wasn't really my fault, it did look that way. However, I picked up some compassion in his voice and gave him an apologetic face. "We're just glad you were okay, Pumpkin." He reached over and tapped my hand. "And proud, too. Let's toast your new job. Chin chin." I beamed, despite myself, and we raised our glasses of wine. Ada raised her soda with a dry expression, though I could see the tiniest hint of sisterly affection. After dinner and more small talk about my new position, I retired to my room, ready to conk out. It was 7 p.m., and somehow even getting 12 hours of sleep didn't seem like it would be enough. I packed some things into my purse when I heard the door shut behind me. Fearing the worst, I spun around in a panic. It was just Ada, staring at me in horror. "What the fuck happened to your head?" she cried out and raced over to inspect me. I swatted her arms away and awkwardly felt my head. The cap had fallen off, leaving my snazzy Band-Aid exposed. "It's nothing. Go away." I glared at her. She crossed her arms to indicate she wasn't about to go anywhere. "What happened? Tell me, or I'll tell Mom and Dad." I knew she would, too. I wanted to tell her, but I didn't know what version, the official story or the truth. Despite all our differences, though, Ada was my sister. Looking into her jaded eyes, impeccably done up with the best makeup, I knew she had some reserves of belief left for me. "Do you want the truth or the official story?" "What's the story you'll end up blogging about?" she asked smartly. She had a point there. If we were, in fact, still doing this project, at the moment I didn't know what Dex would salvage from his camera, let alone the fact that the whole thing might get shot down. We would obviously show people the truth. That meant my parents, the authorities, Uncle Al, would all find out the truth was wildly different from anything they had heard. That said, I also knew they wouldn't believe it anyway. No matter what kind of proof we provided, no matter how well I wrote about the experience, they would assume I made it up. Well, let 'em. "So?" she said impatiently. "What is it? What happened? For real?" "Okay," I said hesitantly. "For real? You better sit down and check your cynicism at the door." She sighed and flopped down on my bed, all gangly limbs and rolling eyes. I started from the beginning, but left out the part about the creepy clown lady because that would just open up another can of worms. By the time I finished, I could see Ada was struggling with it. She chewed thoughtfully on her nails and watched me closely. "So, that's the real story?" "Yes. Believe it or not, I don't care, but you wanted the truth and you got the truth. Dex can confirm what I said." "But you said Dex never saw this Rodney guy." "Roddy, and he did. He just wasn't manhandled by him." I don't know what to say." She got up and started pacing. "Well, you don't have to say anything." She appeared to think that over for a few beats before a curious look came over her face. She asked, "Do you remember when we were really young, or I was really young anyway, and you were like 10 or something, and we would go to the ski cottage every winter?" I did, vaguely. There were a few years where we went skiing in the mountains every winter, though I didn't know what that had to do with anything. "Do you remember the room we slept in?" Again, vaguely. A small, stereotypical cabin room with bunk beds and its own ensuite. I remembered the smell of the fireplace at night and the smell of melting snow on the windowsill come morning, but nothing else. "Kind of," I said slowly. "Do you remember some boy you called Sam who would come and visit you?" The name rang a bell. I tried to think back, but was bombarded with images from a million vacations and a million boys who could have been called Sam. I had one image, though, of a young boy white as the snow outside the window, but it was so hazy and fleeting that it could have been a dream. "Sam," she continued, "would come every night and knock on our window. I would wake up and find you at the window trying to open it. I remember I would ask what you were doing, and you would say, 'Sam's here, I have to let him inside, he's cold.'" The memories started to pour back into my eyes. I saw Sam's sweet, impish face at the window, looking so small and so cold. He must have been around 8 years old, but tiny for his age. I remembered I would open the window and invite him inside, but he would never come. He said he had to stay outside because his mother was mad at him. I remembered it now, the sharp cold as it came through the window and kissed my feet, the frost that gathered on his eyelashes like fairy dust. Yes, I remember, I told her. Her face grew grim, which quickened my pulse instinctively. What about it? I never saw Sam, she said carefully. And I was on the top bunk, too. And I remember you would get up every night, always at 1 a.m., and you would creep over to the window and open it. You would talk to yourself for who knows how long, then you would close the window, look up at me and say Sam had to leave. But there was never anyone there, Perry. I stared at her dumbly while processing this insane piece of information. I had a bad memory, and that happened a long time ago, but now that she brought it up, I remembered it all as clear as day. I mean, I knew I had imaginary friends when I was wee, but there clearly was a boy named Sam. Right? Was I sleepwalking? I asked. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. I don't think so, Ada said. You often talked about him in the day, too, wondering why his mother would lock him out of the cabin. You even told Mom once that you wanted to invite him over for dinner one time. They said sure, thinking he was some kid who hung around. But I never saw him come over for dinner, and I never saw him at your window. How do you remember all of this? You must have been like 5 years old. I remember it because it scared me, Perry. You scared me. I started thinking my older sister was crazy. Crazy, I repeated. I closed my eyes and pressed my hands against my temple. I was too tired to deal with this. This was just an extra scooping of ridiculous on top of a growing pile of insanity. Ada put her hand on my arm. You're not crazy. Right, I muttered and sat down at my desk. I feared this would make me rethink everything. I mean it, for reals. I think you saw Sam, even if I didn't see him, and I think you saw this old Roddy guy, too. I believe you, Perry. I gave her a half-hearted smile. I'm serious. Maybe you could appreciate that, she snarled. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. I do appreciate it, Ada. Calm down. This is just a lot to take. I mean, what does it all mean? It means maybe you're meant to see these things. Maybe if you think back over the years, you'll remember some of the other stuff, too. That didn't sound like a very good idea at all. Other stuff? Was there something else? She tilted her head thoughtfully. Maybe. You acted weird pretty much throughout all of high school. That was the drugs, I told her bitterly. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. You know, it wasn't very fun for me growing up, having you as a sister. Ouch. I'm sorry, I said, hoping she would see how much I meant it. I'm so happy it didn't turn out like me. There's still time, she exclaimed wryly. It doesn't matter anyway. I know it was harder for you than it was for me. Really, I am so sorry. I have no excuse. I don't want to hear it. What's done is done, okay? It doesn't matter. She started to head for the door. Wait, I called out after her, not wanting her to leave me alone with the bomb she just dropped. I've got things to blog about, don't you? I shrugged helplessly. I don't know. You know you do. Screw everyone. Write what happened anyway. And if no one believes you, it doesn't matter because I believe you, this Dex dude believes you, and people believe what you tell them to believe. It's just like fashion. They'll wear what you tell them to wear. How come I wasn't that smart when I was 15? Oh, right. The drugs. What a waste. Oh, and congrats on your new job, she added before leaving the room. Right. The new job. Sam, old Roddy, Dex, blogging, training a receptionist, my sore head. It was time for bed. Good afternoon, Allingham and Associates. Melody speaking. Melody, our future receptionist, picked up the phone and answered in an overly saccharine voice. I was leaning against the wall and watching her as she did her first trial run of phone answering. I had been training her all morning with the basic logistics of the job, even though she had done the job in my absence last week without any trouble. Still, I found it mildly entertaining to stand back and watch as the torch was passed down. Entertaining and extremely relieving. See, whereas I did not make a good receptionist, Melody did. She was bubbly, amiable, and focused. Though it might have been all for show, most people tried their hardest the first day on the job. Something about her screamed receptionist. It could have been she was cute, tanned, and blonde, with the whitest teeth I had ever seen north of California. Or her enthusiasm and immediate organizational skills. She filled all the staplers on her morning break, for fun. Or it could have been that she seemed genuinely interested in helping people, unlike me, who believed a dull stare was just as effective. As I watched her take over my old job, I realized how happy I was to be going on to a new position. It was scary, of course, taking on new responsibilities. The more I thought about it, the more I worried I wouldn't be good enough. On the other hand, maybe I could rise to the occasion, do a great job, and once and for all put all my laziness, procrastination, and overall apathy behind me. I could be a new person. I might surprise myself. That didn't mean I didn't think about Dex during random times of the day, though. I still hadn't heard a peep from him. I considered texting him or Facebook messaging him, something very low-key and casual, but I didn't want to come across as desperate. You didn't call someone back right away after a date. It was the same kind of thing. It's stupid how I kept on comparing our adventure to a date when it was very much the opposite. We weren't even work partners, for crying out loud, and I started to doubt that would ever happen. But I couldn't help it. I felt like I was in some semi-relationship with him, which made me feel even more stupid. This is how stalkers get started. I shook my head and let out a disgusted sigh. Did I do something wrong? Melody was looking at me inquisitively, phone to her ear. I must have drifted off in my head, as usual. I shot her a quick smile and answered truthfully, No, you are doing just fine. I, on the other hand, was not. My mind continued to be torn between getting excited about the new position and feeling disappointed at the lack of one was shown it. And it didn't improve as the day went on, either. As soon as I got home, my mother whisked me off for a little shopping spree. Now, I know that a shopping spree sounds like a lot of fun, and I know Ada rightfully gave me daggers when my mother hustled me out the door, but this wasn't supposed to be an enjoyable experience. My mother usually takes me out on one of these excursions because A, she has bad news and wants to sweeten it up somehow, or B, she wants to go all Eliza Doolittle on my ass. I suspected this trip fell into the latter. So, what's the deal, Mom? I asked as she gingerly pulled the car into the narrow mall parking spot for the umpteenth time. Is there enough room to get out? She asked, looking over at my side. There wasn't, unless she was imagining I was 30 pounds lighter. But instead of prompting another attempt at parking and perhaps a lecture about my diet, I told her to park. Somehow I squeezed out of the car, but not without squishing my boobs against the door. Glad the children in the neighboring car found that funny. Once inside the mall, I felt my heartbeat quicken. The crowds, the pushiness, the people in the middle of the hall who worked the kiosks and practically ran after you with hand cream and hairstylers. The mall did nothing to help my panic attacks and was one of the worst places for me, especially when my nerves were shot. My mother took no notice, as usual. She just ushered me into the Macy's women's department. I had it figured out, even before she started pulling various blazers and skirts. She wanted me to look more professional for my new position. That was fair enough, I suppose. I did need to amp up my wardrobe, and my band t-shirts weren't cutting it anymore, even if I paired them with a nice skirt. I just knew my mom would squeeze me into some very unflattering and un-Perry-like clothes. And I was right. 10 minutes passed, and I made it out of the changing room with just one new outfit that suited me and one hell of a lecture about my weight. We could at least get you new shoes, maybe some heels. You can't gain weight in your feet, she said brightly, and before she had time to insult me again, I was dragged in the direction of the shoe department. Don't get me wrong, I love shoes, but I love my kind of shoes. And my kind of shoes are the funky or comfy kind. The shoes my mom wanted me to wear would be better suited to someone else. Someone like Jen. The thought of her quickened my pulse. I think my mom could tell, because as the bored salesman shoved a pair of shoes back in the box, she said, So, tell me about this man you were with. Dex? You mean the producer of the show? I said, not wanting to go down this road with her. He's really interesting. You like him? No, Mom, I sighed and fingered the smooth patent finish of a pair of 4-inch pumps. Does anyone ever listen to me? Pumpkin, you shouldn't let something like a girlfriend stand in your way, she said with a little too much conviction. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Even the salesman looked shocked at what she said, but he quickly hurried away before he could hear any more. "Mom," I managed to say, "that is terrible advice to give your daughter." She smiled at me, and for an instant I felt like we were sharing our own private joke. "I'm not saying you should do anything. I'm just saying that sometimes life works in funny ways. When I was dating your father, there was a nice man who wanted me. He would send me flowers, ask me on dates when your father wasn't looking. I never ended up doing anything about it. I was loyal. But I often wonder what would have happened if I went for that other man. Ted was his name. Instead. Sure, your father might have been heartbroken, or at least his pride would have been lost, but he'd go on and find someone else. Ted was a very successful businessman. He went on to make millions with some sort of telephone company. My life might have been a lot better if I'd ended up with him. You never know." This made my mind reel, never mind the pain shooting up from the balls of my feet as I attempted to stand in a pair of narrow-toed platforms. "Yeah, well, you wouldn't have had me or Ada if you went with this Ted dude," I admonished her while trying to keep my balance. She shrugged. "I guess. I'm just saying perhaps it's best to take a chance, that's all. You should take those to make your legs look skinniest." I looked down at the shoes. They didn't make me look anything except bow-legged. But I agreed for the sake of ending this horrible conversation. It's not that I thought my parents had the most perfect marriage, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they secretly yearned for different lives. But to hear your mother disclose that so glibly was disturbing, to say the least. But it wasn't over. Things kind of got worse at the till when she paid for the devil shoes. "Now, Perry, I hope this new advancement in your position means you'll think more about seriously getting your own place and moving out." "This too?" The salesman and I were able to exchange a look that said, "It's not over yet?" "Oh my God, Mom," I exhaled loudly. "Well, I'm just saying, you're old enough to be responsible and move out. Please don't think we want you to leave or anything, but with more responsibility comes more responsibility. And I'd really love to turn your bedroom into my own room." "What do you mean, your own room?" I eyed her suspiciously. She shrugged and took the bag from the clerk. He looked happy to be rid of us and relieved that he didn't have to go home with her, unlike me. "I don't know, Pumpkin. Sometimes you get to a certain age where you want your own room and your own place. Besides, your father snores. It would be nice to get a good night's sleep." I don't know exactly how long my parents had been married, but this was the first time I ever heard my mom complain about my dad snoring. I didn't like where this was going at all. As we left the mall and started our walk in the gray drizzle towards the car, our conversation drifted into other topics, such as the newest reality show she was hooked on. I pushed what she said out of my head as much as I could. Chapter 17. The rest of the week went quickly since I was training Melody, easy, and being trained by Frida to prepare for my new job, not so easy. Not everything I learned was going to stay in my head, but I knew perfection wasn't going to be expected right off the bat on Monday. Melody learned quickly, as I thought she would. This allowed me to try and wrap my head around the new Excel spreadsheets that I had to get used to for the upcoming production schedule, while she greeted clients and answered the phones. I was so zoned out in my Excel tornado, Excel was my nemesis, that I barely noticed when she handed me the phone. "Perry, it's for you," Melody said cheerfully, nudging me in the arm until I looked up. "Oh," I said distractedly, mind blown away by some formula that didn't add up. I took the phone and put it to my ear. Melody removed her headpiece. "Perry speaking." My voice didn't sound as friendly as it should have, but whatever, this wasn't my job anymore.
"Ah, hello, is this Perry? Perry Palomino, yes?"
A man said in a high-pitched accent that was borderline ridiculous. Yeah," I replied, giving Melody a look. She raised her brows to say she had no idea who it was.
"Ah, Perry, you a ghost woman, yes? You go see big ghosts, yes?"
the man insisted. I paused, trying to figure out what was going on. "Maybe."
Yes, you her. You the lady on the computer. You have ghosts show up and blow up lighthouses. You a big star."
My heart stopped. I quickly peered down at the number on the call display. It was a Seattle area code. "Dex?" I asked, the hope in my voice clearly registering.
"Dex, he is handsome man, yes. That man, genius, big, sexy genius. He discover you, made you big star."
"Dex," I repeated slowly. There was a pause, then the voice giggled high and shrill. I recognized that laugh anywhere. It was Dex. "I'm sorry to call you at work," he said, his regular low and smooth voice coming through the line and flooding my heart with warmth. "But it took me a couple of tries to realize you might not have your phone anymore." "Oh, that's okay," I said brightly. The phone started to light up with another call. Melody moved to press the button, but I shooed her away. The other calls could wait. This is what I call the receptionist's prerogative. "I'll try and keep this brief, as I'm sure you have to get back to answering other calls for more important people. By the way, how'd your meeting go?" Good. Fantastic," I said, not wanting to outright talk about my new position in front of Melody. It seemed like it would be in bad taste. "Do I need to speak in code? Did you get the job?" "Yes to both." I smiled. Melody watched me inquisitively. "Well, that's good news for you, right?" he asked innocently. "Of course." "Hmm," he mused. The line went silent. "What?" I asked, feeling funny about his reaction. "I need you to come up to Seattle on Friday afternoon," he stated in a very no-nonsense voice, as if I had no choice. "What?" I exclaimed. "I can't do that." "You have to," he replied. I looked at Melody. She got the hint. She got out of her chair and whispered, "I'm gonna go use the bathroom." I mouthed thank you to her, then promptly sat down in her place. "What do you mean I have to?" I whispered violently into the mouthpiece. "I've put the footage together. I've composed the music. The shit is fucking brilliant, Perry. At least I think so. Jimmy wants to meet with you on Friday, though, just to make sure." "But what? Footage? So you were able to save it?" "Well, I hate to borrow an old phrase from your favorite decade, but duh," he said sarcastically. I rolled my eyes, though there was no one to see it. "This is the first I've heard of it. I thought you were going to call me as soon as you knew what you had." "No, I said I would call if I knew anything interesting, and Jimmy just told me he wants to see you Friday no matter what. I thought that was pretty interesting." "Dex, I can't just go to Seattle on such short notice. I start my new position on Monday, and I still have to train the receptionist," I hissed. "She sounded well trained to me. A lot nicer than you, actually." I swear I almost hung up the phone. I took a deep breath and hoped he would respond to reason. "Listen, Dex, I can't leave. Your Jimmy guy will understand. Maybe I could come on Saturday or next weekend," I said very slowly and calmly. "Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's now or never, do or don't, or die, depending on how dramatic you want to make this. Just call in sick." I did feel sick now that all this was going on. I should have known this wouldn't be a simple situation. It sure as hell hadn't been simple so far. "Oh, I don't know," I said wearily. "Call in sick. Your receptionist will manage. She'll have to manage without you anyway, right? Listen here, I will fly you up here, no cost to you. You'll meet with Jimmy. He'll be won over by your personality, I'm hoping. You'll sign some papers, we'll have ourselves some champagne, and everything will be right with the world." That sounded all too easy. I sighed, unsure of what to say. It was another one of those moments where I knew my actions would determine a new branch in my life, another road to go down. Did I say yes, ditch work, and possibly damage my new job? Or did I say no, say goodbye to working with Dex and doing something truly interesting, albeit unconventional, with my life, and move forward down a more responsible path? Could I do both? Maybe. "Can I call you back? I'm not really free to talk," I managed to say just as Melody came back into reception. "You can call me anytime," he said dryly, "but I need to know your answer right now. I've got Jimmy right here in front of me, and he's starting to think I'm a bit of a liar." "You are a liar," I muttered and gave Melody an apologetic look. She eyed the blinking lines on the console, but didn't say anything. "Yes or no?" Dex said, impatience rising in his voice. I could just see his dark brows furrowed, his forehead creased. I took in a deep breath and closed my eyes. There was no point trying to figure out what was right, no point in thinking. I said the first thing that came to my mind. "Yes." I said yes. "Thanks, Perry," he said sincerely, gently, almost. "I'll email you the flight details right now. I'll come get you at the airport and everything. The meeting will only take a couple of hours at the most, and then you'll be back on the plane home. Easy as pie. You remember the pie analogy, don't you?" "Yeah." "Good. See you soon, kiddo." And then the line went dead. I exhaled and slowly hung up the phone. Melody gave me a perky smile. "Man troubles?" I smiled despite myself. I guess you could say that. The next day and a half was completely upside down for me. Dex emailed me my flight tickets, which meant that everything was set to go. The only thing I had to do was call in sick on Friday morning. I didn't actually think Frida would have a problem with it, meaning she might feel inconvenienced and perhaps a bit fearful that I may not come in on Monday, though I would assure her I would. But I didn't think she'd jump to the immediate conclusion that I was playing hooky. After all, the swine flu thing was still going around. No, the problem I knew I'd have was with my parents. How on earth was I going to tell them I was sick and then hop a plane to Seattle? I had a cold that only a Seattle doctor knew how to fix. Might as well tell them I was going to Seattle Grace Hospital to get checked up by Dr. McDreamy. I knew if I told my parents the truth, they would be so terribly disappointed in me. I could tell they were relieved when it seemed like this whole ghost show wasn't going anywhere. And I knew how happy they were when I got promoted. I couldn't bear to disappoint them after so many years of constantly letting them down. It got so bad that on Thursday night, I had to sequester Ada in my room and ask for her advice. I lay on my bed, my stuffed elephant squeezed between my arms, staring hopelessly at the ceiling. Ada sat at my desk watching me thoughtfully. It felt like a bizarro shrink and patience scenario. "Well?" I asked, frustrated at how silent she had been while I poured my heart out to her. "Chill out, I'm thinking," she answered, put upon. "Are you, or are you humoring me?" "I'm humoring you, duh. You're the second person in 2 days to use that phrase," I pointed out. "Just tell Mom and Dad you're going to work and tell your work that you're sick," she announced. "Do you think I always go to school when I'm supposed to?" "Ada," I exclaimed, the big sister in me coming out. "Whatever, you were a druggie," she said defensively. "Please stop throwing that back in my face." "No, you please stop acting like you give a shit. I'm fucking 15, Perry. Think I'm gonna listen to whatever sisterly advice you try and give me? Wake up and smell the apathy." "Oh, jeez. How emo can you get?" "You wanted my advice, you got it. You think I'm gonna tell you what you want to hear? If you want to be all, smart and adult about this shit, then do the right thing. But if you want to do something fun and take a chance, then screw what anyone else thinks. Rock and roll, man." I laughed at that last bit and sat up. Ada had gotten out of her chair and was picking up my guitar. "I never play anymore," she said wistfully. "I've been busy, and I still suck. Dream big, dream big." She strummed it absently, chords all wrong, but her words resonated in my head. I used to dream big. It seemed like somewhere along the way I had forgotten about that and gave up. "Okay," I said, coming to a decision. "I'll tell Mom and Dad that I'm going to work. I'll take the bike to the airport and just hang out there for a few hours. Then I'll tell them that I'm going out after work or something so they won't worry when I come home late. I think you can be pretty smart when you want, Perry. You didn't need me to tell you all of that." She put the guitar down and brushed her long bangs out of her blackened eyes. "Thanks," I told her. She smiled sheepishly. "You only get one compliment from me every couple of months, okay?" "Got it." "Good luck," was the last thing she said before leaving the room. I have no idea how I fell asleep that night. My nerves were buzzing and my thoughts were high, but soon enough, the sun came up. Chapter 18. I got on the airplane with my heart fluttering in my chest like some panicked bird, and gave the flight attendant the biggest smile I could muster when I handed over my ticket. I felt like a very important person, even though that was not the case. Still, there was a sense of mystery and fugitiveness to my actions, since everything I did was kind of a lie. I must admit, it was very exciting. I called Frida at 6:30 a.m. to add to the realism of my excuse. If there was anything I knew about calling in sick, it's that you rarely have the strength to call at the appropriate time. She did sound slightly suspicious, which made it hard to do the dance between sounding too sick to come, but not sounding so sick that it didn't seem like I would come in on Monday. In the end, though, there wasn't much she could do, and she told me to call her on Sunday night to confirm that I would be okay to work. My parents were a bit easier. I just got dressed and ready like I always did. I was jittery, though, and my excitement showed even before my morning coffee. While I grabbed my leftovers from the fridge, my mother asked if I was okay. Thankfully, Ada was there, and she switched the conversation over to her before I could say anything. I almost winked at her in thanks, but had my mom caught that, we would have both been toast. It was a short hop on a small plane before landing at the SeaTac airport. The flight was uneventful, but I couldn't stop fidgeting in my seat like a barrel of monkeys. By the time we landed and were coasting to the gate, the quiet old man next to me patted my hand and said, "It's okay, we're safe now." Oh, if only I knew that was true. When it was time to exit, I grabbed my purse and walked down the aisle to the door, brimming with excitement. I felt like a character in a romantic movie. Again, this was stupid girly thinking on my part, but there was no way I could pretend I didn't feel that way. After giving the pilot an enthusiastic salute as I walked into the terminal, I saw Dex. I wish I could say that he was just a man, as I had told myself all week. But seeing him standing there by the gate, it just wasn't true. He was leaning casually against a supporting pole, a toothpick darting in and out of his mouth. His dark hair was spiked up at the front, and the scratch down his forehead had faded. It still added a little roughness to his face, which looked younger and fresher than ever. His eyes were bright and shining, and I could have sworn his eyelashes were longer or something, because he almost looked pretty. Even his Errol Flynn stash barely showed, and his goatee was groomed as clean as an early ski run. His attire was different, too. A white, long-sleeved dress shirt and black pants. He could have been a waiter if it wasn't for the oversized army green windbreaker he had on top. I can't lie. The sight of him made my heart turn into syrup, swirling around in slow motion in my chest. Our eyes interlocked, and as if I was in some hormonal tractor beam, I felt myself being drawn to him. Thank goodness the tractor beam had enough sense to stop as soon as I was within striking distance of him. "Hi," I said, my voice squeaking more than I would have liked. He took the toothpick out with one hand and flicked it on the floor in front of a woman walking by. She gave him a dirty look. He gave her a sleazy grin in return and wagged his eyebrows at her suggestively. Then he turned to me and grinned. "You came." He sounded surprised. "Yep," I replied, adjusting the purse on my shoulder, a bit unsure if I should hug him or not. "You're more foolish than I thought." He reached out and smacked my arm. "God bless the youth." Before I could even process what he meant by that, he took his pocket watch out of his pant pocket and glanced at it. "We better get going, And he was off like a shot down the terminal. I trotted after him, starting to wonder if I had made a mistake. I also found myself wishing his coat was a bit shorter so I could see his ass better. Yep, I was pretty done for at this point. The drive downtown was fairly long, with traffic jams and construction zones clogging up the I-5. During that time, I was filled in on what had come out of the footage. At first, I thought we were fucked because a lot of the shots were just black with the occasional sound coming through. But then I realized if I could at least save the audio and then play them at other parts, then it would add to the whole ambiance. And then if I could get your narration at certain points, it would fill up the blank spots. Watching Dex speak about the film made me realize how much he actually cared about the whole thing, and how he knew exactly what he was talking about. He could see the big picture, whereas I couldn't imagine how anything we shot would become remotely interesting. If I had the camera myself up in old Roddy's face, it would have been a different story. But Dex seemed so confident that he had something amazing on his hands, even if I didn't believe it myself. He must have seen the cynicism on my face, because he turned to me and said, "Believe me, it looks good. We've got a good thing going on here." One of those instances where I'm just gonna have to trust you, right? "I would hope you'd always trust me," he answered, rather seriously. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I looked out the window. It's not that Dex wasn't trustworthy. He saved my life, in a way. But because he was so unpredictable, I had a hard time accepting everything he said. There was also the whole self-admitted liar bipolar thing, and the fact that I wanted nothing more than for him to pull the car over so I could climb on his lap and molest the crap out of him. Well, I knew from experience that you weren't supposed to trust the guys you thought were sexy as hell. Dark, brooding, and mysterious? Handle with care. And, of course, there was the term always, as if he knew for a fact we would be working together indefinitely. As much as I wanted to, the responsible adult side of me needed to know exactly what I was getting into. Would it interfere with my job? How much would I get paid, if anything? Basically, what was in it for me? The last thing I wanted was to be taken advantage of. I mulled these things over during the rest of the drive, and even until we were in an elevator going up one of Seattle's skyscrapers. I guess for a little internet company, they were actually doing quite well for themselves. We got off at the elevator and turned left at a sign that read Shownet. We paused in front of a French door made of pebbled glass. Dex reached for the handle and then stopped. He looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. I was okay, though each step toward the door had me feeling more and more anxious until I was shaking in my boots. "Just a bit nervous," I admitted. "But I always get nervous. Always, no matter what."
"Let's hope he finds that as endearing as I do," Dex said, with his tone not as promising as I would have hoped.
We entered the room and said some polite introductions to their receptionist, Lee, who responded to Dex with all the sparkle of a Barbie doll, but whose eyes turned positively demonic as soon as she spoke to me. And I thought I was a bad receptionist. Sheesh. Then we went into a small but pleasantly attired boardroom. A fancy-looking espresso machine sat in the corner, which I eyed feverishly. Dex caught my stare.
"Do you want some?"
He was about to go to it when the door swung open and a slender, balding Korean man with hipster glasses stepped into the room. Dex promptly sat down in a chair and motioned for me to do the same. The bald man walked to the other side of the glass table, threw a binder down with a loud clank, and leaned across it, peering at me.
"Jimmy, this is Perry Palomino," Dex said quickly.
I was about to give Jimmy my hand, but he just nodded dismissively and sat in an overstuffed swivel chair. If he had a cat in his lap, he would have been the perfect arch-villain in a comic book film. I glanced over at Dex for support. He reached out under the table and squeezed my knee. Slightly inappropriate, but comforting nonetheless. "So, you're the one," Jimmy said slowly, his voice high and careful. "That's me," I agreed brightly, hoping I was projecting some kind of charm. "You know, I was going about my business, making some money." He started, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. Dex and I waited patiently while he did this. He slipped his glasses back on his face and looked me straight in the eye. "And then you come out of nowhere." He left it at that. Should I say something? Should I apologize? I wasn't sure where this Jimmy fellow was going with all this, but he didn't seem like the easiest person to talk to. Dex turned to me.
"Jimmy just wants to make sure you're fully into this."
"Well, perhaps," I said as confidently as possible. "But I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. What are we talking about here?" "At least you seem smarter than you look," Jimmy sniffed. I took offense to that, but didn't let it show. I felt Dex stiffen up beside me. Jimmy pulled some papers out of the binder and looked them over, but didn't hand them over to me. "If I decide to do this, which is a huge if, because even though I like what Dex has shown me, and I do think the man can make a pile of shit taste like fucking candy, I'm still not sold on you. But if I decide to give you both the go-ahead, I hope you realize this isn't going to make you famous, and it isn't going to make you rich. All I want is to bring in enough advertisers to make ends meet and maybe give Dex a new fucking camera." I looked over at Dex. He was embarrassed and looked down at his hands. "I make money," Jimmy continued, "by keeping costs lower than they should be. For you, Miss Palomino, that means an hourly wage based on exactly how many hours you contribute to the project. That might mean a lot of money one week. It might mean shit all the next week. I'd suggest you keep your day job as a barista, or whatever the hell you do." "I'm a production coordinator at an advertising firm," I said proudly. "Oh, so you are smarter than you look. Well, that helps for something." I couldn't help but narrow my eyes at him. I'd never been in the presence of someone who rubbed me quite the wrong way as this guy did.
"Perry will decide whether she needs to keep a job on the side or not."
Dex spoke up for me. "Don't be a hero, Dex," Jimmy said dismissively. He turned his beady eyes on me again. "Dex here tells me you have quite a natural affinity for sussing out these so-called ghostly situations." "I did?" Jimmy continued. "But I think that's a load of horseshit. Do you think it matters to me whether you're the next fucking ghost whisperer or not? I don't care. But if you can sell it, and Dex has assured me you can, with your writing at least, then that's all I care about. You guys do the groundwork, you do the research, and I'll send you both to wherever you need to go in order to create a fucking good show." Dex leaned forward in his seat and spoke to me.
"I've already got a case down in Laredo, Texas. We could go investigate. Should be something really fantastic. Mimic ghosts."
I didn't know what mimic ghosts were, but the idea of going to Texas was pretty cool. Jimmy looked unconvinced, though. "Now, the main problem I have with you, Perry," Jimmy said bluntly, "is that while I think you can write a compelling story, and Dex says you're easy to work with, I just don't think you're attractive enough to be on the internet." My face immediately flushed with sparking heat, and my jaw dropped a little bit. He continued, "It's not that you aren't pretty. You've got something there, but you've seen what we have on the other shows. Dex's gal Jennifer, well, her body, no offense, Dex, is what brings in the traffic and the dollars. Plus, you've got her friend on the side, and those two could vomit wine all day and people would still watch. I just don't see people watching a show with a bigger girl on it. Again, no offense, it's just the reality." I felt like someone swiped at my guts with a ragged hook. This had to be the most humiliating thing I had ever been subjected to, and that said a lot, coming from someone who was known as the chubster in high school. I waited for the tears to flow, but I was in too much shock to react in any way. That didn't stop Dex, though. He suddenly got to his feet, his chair flew out from under him and wheeled backwards towards the wall. He slammed his hands down on the table with such force that I was afraid the glass was going to shatter. He leaned across until he was very close to Jimmy's worried face. "Do you ever get sick of being a complete asshole, Jimmy?" Dex growled, his voice scraping the bottom of the register, spitting with rawness. "She may not be a self-obsessed, stick-thin bimbo, but she's more than right for this job. You're right in that she's got something about her, and we have a right to share that with the world. The show is more than just stupid ghost stories. The show will go further into those mysteries than any show has gone before. It will bring that real back to reality programming. She's smart, she's funny, and she's not afraid to take risks, not to mention that she's beautiful, sexy, and charming. You know it, I know it, and soon everyone else will know it. The only person who doesn't know it is her because of archaic fuckheads like yourself telling her otherwise." My mouth dropped open another inch. I couldn't believe what Dex had just said. It had to be the most wonderful thing anyone had ever said about me, and his words and passion melted me from the inside out. I felt the tears finally coming. "Are we really going to argue about her?" Jimmy said after a few beats, thumbing at me. Dex continued to stare at Jimmy, rage pulsing at the corners of his jaw. This was too much for me to handle. The tears started to flow. Even though they were tears of frustration and anger, I didn't know what to do. So I decided to leave. I got up quickly, squeaked out an "excuse me," and bolted out of the room and the office before Jimmy, Dex, or the receptionist had a chance to say anything. I pushed the button for the elevator a few times before my vision was blurred by my tears. I decided the stairs might be the quickest way out. I got into the stairway and ran down. At first, I wasn't sure what I was running from. By the time I had gone down 10 flights and my knees were starting to hurt, I slowed my pace and started breathing in deeply. I probably shouldn't have run like that. I know it was totally unprofessional and made me look even worse, but what was the point in sticking around to be humiliated further? It's not like I was going to get a show anyway at this rate, no matter how hard Dex fought for me. The thought of what he said brought a sense of warmth into my aching, wheezing chest. I slowed down even more and sat down on one of the cold steps. The stairwell was empty, and I had another 30 floors to go down. I took in a few deep breaths and tried to run through what had happened. I had two feelings battling inside of me. One was that icky feeling you get when you know you've made an idiot of yourself. The other was a sense of unworthiness. Never in my whole life have I ever had someone put so much stock into me as a person and actually believe it. Or at least act like he believed it. I was a huge risk for him, and he seemed willing to jump with no rope or cord attached. It amazed me that Dex said all of that, and to his boss, no less. I'd be on my ass in a second if I ever said anything like that to Frida. And at that thought, I was shot with a third feeling. Guilt. The guilt of lying to my boss and putting my job on the line, all for nothing. I could see the shoes my mom had bought me, sitting proudly in their shoebox. I could have ruined everything for myself. "What a mess," I said out loud, my voice echoing from the cement walls. I sat there for a few more minutes, trying to figure out my next course of action. I didn't know where Dex was, and I didn't have a phone, so I couldn't call him. But I did have money and a plane ticket. Getting a cab and heading back to the airport seemed like the smartest thing to do. Just go back home, try and buckle down, and make something good of my life and forget all of this ever happened. Not that it was going to be that easy. To just let go of all those hopes that this had given me. Hope, potential, dreams. I really thought this was my way out of an ordinary life. My promotion was great and all, but it was an ordinary job and still felt stifling. And when I thought about this opportunity, it just paled in comparison. This had been a chance to actually prove to everyone what exactly I was capable of. Even when I didn't believe anything was going to come of this, something at the back of my head and in the bottom of my heart was already fully invested. I sighed. I wiped away any makeup smudges under my eyes, brushed back my hair, and stood up. I'd probably end up dwelling on this all day regardless, but there was no point doing it in a cold stairwell in a giant Seattle office building. I made my way down the rest of the stairs and out of the lobby, walking quickly in case I saw someone I didn't want to see. Not that I thought Jimmy would be waiting to pounce on me and insult me further, but I was paranoid. Once outside, I scanned the street for cabs. It looked like there might be one across the street in front of a boutique hotel. I was heading for it, hoping no one else would take it, when I heard my name being called. It was Dex's voice. I didn't want to turn around. I wanted to be free of all this. I kept walking and ignored it. I didn't get very far. I heard footsteps behind me and my arm being grabbed. He stepped in front of me, panting slightly, a crazed look in his eyes. I looked down at his free hand. He had a pen and a stack of papers in it. "Perry," he said breathlessly, "why did you run?" I gave him a look. Was he serious? "I'm sure being humiliated is a normal thing for you," I sneered. He rolled his eyes. "Jimmy is Jimmy. Don't listen to him. I don't, and it doesn't matter. He listens to me." He let go of my arm and placed the papers in one of my hands and the pen in the other. "Would you do me the honor of signing this contract?" "What?" I looked down at my hands. I didn't understand. "We've got the show, kiddo, if you still want it," he said, peering deep into my eyes. "How?" He said. He shook his head. "That's just Jimmy. Like I told you, he listens to me. He knows he would be stupid not to take a chance on this." Though I felt uncomfortable about all this, there was a tingling of excitement biting at my toes. "Dex," I said, looking down at the paper, but not really seeing it. "I don't want to do anything if you forced someone—" "I didn't," he exclaimed. "He likes the challenge as much as I do. Now what do you say? You know how I feel now." I looked up at him. Did I? He smiled at me, took the papers from my hand, and held them against his chest. He took my other hand and put the pen to the papers. "You're signing it on my heart. That's gotta say something," he said. I took in a deep breath, not sure of how to feel or think. I know Dex wasn't talking about anything too deep, but the fact was he was still willing to take this chance on me and somehow convinced his boss to do the same. I felt uncomfortable, but a touch of excitement climbed through my body at an alarming rate. "We'll make a great team, I promise." He grinned and tried to move my hand down to the signature area. I couldn't help but smile back. It was a nice little moment, standing on the side of a busy Seattle street with the contract to our future lying against his chest, the pen and the power in my own hand. I smiled even more until I thought my cheeks would burst. I still had to look over the contract and make sure I knew exactly what I was getting into. I knew I would probably have to work at the agency part-time in order to have enough time to film during the week. I knew that might mean I could lose my job, because I had no idea if they would let me work part-time. Therefore, I could be tossing away a perfectly acceptable future in advertising. It also meant disappointing my parents again, those damn shoes, and working with a man who I was falling for when he expressed no real interest in me and had a girlfriend, despite his apparent devotion to me in this project. Even though there were no guarantees of any success, I still signed my name, on his heart, no less. I knew it was the most important thing I had ever written. Dex laughed when I was done and patted me hard on the back. "You've made me a very happy man, kiddo," he said, folding the papers into his hand. "Now, wait here while I run these up to him. I'll be quick." He turned and sprinted toward the building, his hair flopping against his head with each stride. Now that I was alone again, it actually hit me. I was doing this, I was actually doing this. Things were never going to be the same again. I did a tiny Mary Tyler Moore jump in the street to the amusement of the passers-by. At least they met me with smiles. Dex wasn't long, and within minutes he was back at my side, wiping his hands. "Done deal," he said. "No turning back now." I nodded, and we started off toward his car. We walked in silence, mostly due to the little conversations we were probably having in our heads at the same time. But before we got in, I grabbed his hand and stopped him. I wasn't sure what to say or how to say it. I licked my lips nervously and looked up into those brown eyes of his. They were almost unreadable, but I detected a current of worry behind them. I let go of his hand. "Thank you." He pursed his lips and nodded. "You're welcome." That was all we ever said about what had happened. During the ride back to the airport, we discussed the logistics of our future endeavors. The episode, which I quickly reviewed on his laptop in the car, was very well done and well edited. There wasn't much in the way of ghostly proof, but there was a frightening atmosphere to the whole show, and I knew that I could write the perfect piece to go with it. It would be the truth, of course, that I would put out there for anyone to believe. Dex said the episode would go live on a Sunday night in 2 weeks. He and I would then push hard for lots of exposure. I could use the existing YouTube videos and redirect people. I could use my sister's blog and even create my own separate dummy blog to increase more traffic. Dex said Jimmy was pretty good at getting advertising, which is something I could have done, considering my day job, but I wanted to keep that as separate from this as possible. In 3 weeks, we would fly down to Texas for the weekend and shoot our next episode. We decided the best thing for me to do would be to request that I work at the agency Tuesdays through Thursdays so I could have Fridays through Mondays to travel, shoot, and write. It was a gamble for me to think that work was going to let me do this, and even more imposing than that, it meant I was going to have no life for the foreseeable future. But what life did I really have before, anyway? As anxious and nervous as I was about the new path I was about to head down, a tiny part of me knew everything was going to be okay. It felt right. When we got to the airport, Dex pulled the car up to the terminal, got out, and opened the door for me. "Thanks," I said, feeling charmed and connected.
"I've got a thank you present for you," he said with a jovial glint in his eyes. "Close your eyes."
The childish part of my brain hoped that maybe it was something as simple and romantic as a kiss. I closed them. He placed something cold in my hands. I opened my eyes to see a shiny new iPhone sitting in them. "What?" I beamed. "You didn't have to."
"I kinda did, and I kinda wanted to. Now you can return my crazy texts at all hours of the night." He winked. "It's more for my pleasure than for yours."
I squeezed the phone in my hand and put my arms out to hug him. He embraced me wholeheartedly. Until his own phone started to ring. He broke away and looked at it. I could see on the screen it was Jennifer.
"Sorry, I have to take this," he said apologetically to me and patted me hard on the shoulder. "Have a safe flight. I'll call you soon."
I nodded awkwardly as he put the phone to his ear and said, "Hey, babe." He talked to her, sincerely engrossed in the conversation. I turned around, feeling a bit stupid, and walked away toward the ticket agent. I looked behind at him, hoping to catch him watching me. Instead, he was still talking and walking back to his car, his lithe figure cutting through the crowd. I felt pretty small as I walked to my gate and waited for the plane to arrive, but somehow pushed those thoughts out of my head. If I could just get over these feelings that I had for him, then I would be okay. After all, it was just a stupid girl crush that I had. What was really important was the fact that I was about to embark on a journey unlike any I'd ever been on before. I looked around the busy gate area at the nameless people sitting about and decided I should probably use the bathroom before I got on the plane. Though it was a short flight, I didn't have an aisle seat, and I hated having to climb over people just because I had to pee. I walked down the hall, past the gift shops, bars, and a few more gates before I found the restroom. It was surprisingly empty, which was a nice change from what airport bathrooms usually look like. There was only one woman in a stall down near the end. I noticed her red patent Mary Janes and old lady stockings. I went into the nearest stall to the front. I hung my bag up on the sturdy coat hook, noting how damp the ground looked, and proceeded to sit down. As I did so, I heard the stall door at the end open and the woman slowly walk out. I didn't hear her flush, which was pretty gross, but expected in public washrooms. I swear, women were just as bad as men in these scenarios. It must have been some sort of internal rebellion mechanism like, I don't live here, so I don't have to clean. Instead, I'll act like a fucking monkey. As I was thinking that, I noticed how precise the woman's footsteps were as she walked down the aisle toward me and the sinks. Heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. It was slow enough to be creepy, and creepy enough that I had too much stage fright to even go. I just sat there holding my breath and waiting for her to walk past. But she didn't. Heel, toe, heel, toe. And then it stopped somewhere outside my stall. Heel, toe, heel, toe. It was like she was walking toward me. What the fuck? Heel, toe. And then it stopped, just as the round toes of the Red Mary Janes were visible beneath my stall door, facing directly towards me. This crazy bitch was standing right outside my fucking door. I didn't know what to say or do. I didn't want to move, but I was on the fucking toilet seat. This was the most vulnerable position ever. I kept my eyes on the toes, thinking at some point they'd move, or maybe the woman would say something. But neither of those things happened. There was a large enough crack between the stall doors, though, usually the bane of every public washroom. I slowly moved my head over so that I was looking through the crack. Maybe I could get an idea of what she was doing. And through the crack, I saw an eye, a heavily made-up, aging eye staring right back at me, face pressed up to the door. I screamed. I couldn't help it. I screamed and jumped off of the toilet, yanking up my pants far enough and flung myself out of the bathroom stall, fully ready to confront whoever the fuck was out there. But as I stumbled out of the stall, the door banging loudly, I didn't see anyone. There was no one there. I was alone in the washroom, and the woman at the end of the aisle was gone. I put my hand to my neck to feel how fast my pulse was racing. I closed my eyes and took in a few deep breaths. After counting to 10, I opened them, expecting the worst. I was still alone in the bathroom, my bag hanging on the door, which slowly moved back and forth. I grabbed it off the hook and hustled myself over to the sink. I could deal with peeing on the plane. At least I knew I wouldn't be alone there. I placed the bag on the part of the counter that wasn't wet and quickly splashed cold water on my face, avoiding my eye makeup. I looked up in the mirror and saw nothing but my reflection. I turned for the paper towels. Creepy clown lady was standing there beside the dispenser. I screamed again, but it was caught in my throat and came out as a breathless gurgle. It was her, as clear as day. Her wrinkled, pancaked face and violet-tinted coif. The bizarre taffeta gown with sewn-on pom-poms. Her stocking legs and red vintage shoes. She kept her glassy cataract eyes on me, almost willing me to calm down and stop screaming, as silently as I was trying. I don't know how long we stood there, just eyeing each other, only a few feet apart. But at some point I found strength returning to my throat, a life force rushing around my heart. "Who the hell are you?" I yelled at her. She didn't say anything. Her expression didn't change. She kept staring at me with her knowing eyes that were vaguely inquisitive and strangely patient. I wasn't even afraid at this point. I just wanted to know what the fuck was going on. I took a tentative step toward her. "Please tell me, who are you?" She smiled slowly. Her mouth spread, her yellow teeth showed, and the bad lipstick job became more glaring. As before, her eyes never smiled along with it. Whatever I had just said about not being afraid, forget it. I was very afraid. "You're just starting," the woman said with her slight accent. Her voice sounded disembodied. I was immediately reminded of a scene with Robert Blake in Lost Highway. "You need to keep going," she continued. "Who are you?" I repeated. "You need each other. You need to set this right." "Set what right?" I asked. What are you talking about? We did set it right." She shook her head very slowly. As she did, flakes of makeup fell off her face and flittered to the ground like pixie dust. I watched this, dumbfounded. "It's not over yet. You and Dex need each other. We need you. It's not over yet." I wanted to strangle her, whoever she was. Why? Why? I asked frantically. Please, just tell me why so I can know.
You'll find out. It's not over yet. You're just discovering, you're just starting.
You keep saying that. What do you mean I'm just starting? I yelled at her just as I heard the bathroom door close. I turned to see a businesswoman walk in, wheeling a carry-on behind her. She gave me a concerned look and walked past us down the aisle. I followed her walk and saw her give me one last fearful look before she walked into a stall. I looked back at creepy clown lady, but she was gone. I quickly spun around, and after seeing no one, I picked up my bag and ran out the door and into the terminal. It was full of passengers going to and fro. The lady had vanished. And then my flight was boarding. I had no choice but to scuttle back to my gate and slink on board as the guilty party who was holding up everyone else. It was only till I sat myself down in my seat after squeezing past the angry fat man on the aisle that I had a chance to mull over what had happened. The lady had been there. She had spoken to me. I interacted with her. But where did she come from, and what did she want? I couldn't have seen her. My imagination was good, but it wasn't that good. I had to keep going? I was just getting started? And most intriguing of all, Dex and I needed each other? What could Dex ever need me for? I was pondering that as the plane pulled away from the gate. All of the feelings of excitement I had earlier about the show, about my future, were now compounded with an increasing sense of urgency and trepidation. I had so many questions, now, that needed to be answered, and quickly. To get a handle on my thoughts, I looked out the window at the sunshine that was coming through the dark afternoon clouds. And as if fate knew exactly what I was thinking, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing by one of the windows. It was Dex, waving goodbye. This concludes Darkhouse by Karina Halley, narrated by Joe Raylan. Copyright 2011 by Karina Halley. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Karina Halley, care of the Waxman Level Literary Agency, and was produced in the year 2017 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, a division of Recorded Books, which holds the copyright thereto. Please visit tantor.com for more information on our growing library of unabridged audiobooks and to take advantage of special offers.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.